Want to tell the Rebbe the words of the new song that we're singing with Mashiach, right? So I'm just going to read him. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Okay? We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. Oh yeah, I'm Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be this year. I'm Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now. Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. I'm Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. I'm Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Hey!
So, welcome everyone. Just decided to hop on for a bit before I go to sleep because, why not? Tonight is Purim, and I mean, my costume isn't really prepared. I just kind of want to go on campus and just get a bunch of olive branches, and I mean, I already made a wreath for myself, but it might be a bit too dried up now to use it, so I might have to make a new one. But yeah, so I'm just going to play on the Hufflepuff character I made, and I'm obsessed with plants. I mean, to be fair, I'm obsessed with plants regardless of which character I'm playing on, but so they have potions class. I also installed some new mods, so it's going to be a bit slower, but hopefully will be worth it. Oof, that's some lag. Oh shoot, I never went back to get my mandrakes. Let's see, so back down here. See that? Shoot. Oh, that's weird. I don't see that where it is. Yeah, it shows up here. I don't know why it didn't show up there. Maybe it'll show up now. Nope. Strange. I'll wait for these to grow. Oh, and then I've also got my Mandrake Talisman that I can use as part of my costume. So I'm basically going as... I don't even really know what I'm going as. I'm just going as my costume. Let's see. Okay, here, nice. How many do we get? Okay, only 2. Where's some more? Oh, shoot, where is it? I'll just throw more of that.
What are you up to now?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Rebellion.
Oh wow, that's a lot more people here, I think.
It's a relief to finally have an answer as to why that portrait was empty.
Oof, lag.
Rebellion. We wondered if someone from the military guidance school after the incident in Hogsmeade. Professor Black would never allow that, but he made him look completely incompetent, which he is.
Oh, come on. I should have gotten that. Nope. Oh, come on. Sounds like Elmo. Got it.
Rebellion.
Potion is one of the most challenging and hazardous subjects taught at this school. As 5th years, you will be required to reach new heights of both discipline and intellect. You will begin this term by brewing a Wigan-Weld potion. Mr. Takar, can you tell us why this particular potion might come in handy?
Yes, Professor Sharp. The Wigan-Weld potion can be used to sterilize and even heal a variety of injuries.
It can heal some injuries, but not all.
Everyone knows
Point
Amit.
for Ravenclaw. Before today's class is completed, each of you will accrue the Wigan-Weld potion of your own. You never know when you might need it. Please begin. Use a strong, even motion when crushing your ingredients. Please be meticulous when adding powder to your potions. One errant sneeze could be disastrous. I see most of you have not forgotten how to stir. Not an easy potion to brew. Well done. And for what I hear of your recent exploits in Hogsmeade, you'd also do well to practice brewing the defensive Edurus potion. Professor Weasley had you acquire the recipe from J. Pippins, correct?
Yes, sir.
Good. For the moment, you can find the ingredients you need in my office. But in the future, you'll be expected to provide your own ingredients. Some can be harvested from the plants you grow in your herbology class, and rarer ones can be purchased. Others, however, may be harder to obtain, and will require you to be a bit more resourceful. Come and see me when you've finished brewing, and we'll see if it was skill or luck the first time round.
Professor Sharp said that Witherwell potion can treat injuries. I hope I never need it. Don't fret if you run out of ingredients. I simply grow most of what I need.
My Wiggenweld potion's utter rubbish. Wish I could just replace it with one from Pippins.
Professor Sharp must have learned a lot during his time at Aurora. So would you talk about it more?
I was impressed that you were able to answer Professor Sharp's question about the Wiggenweld potion.
Oh, you're the new student. I've heard much about you. Thank you. I'm Ami, by the way. Pleasure, truly. And I've never seen anyone brew such a flawless Wiggenweld potion on their first try. Well done.
I'm glad I was able to get it right the first time.
You must simply have a knack for potion making. Some students seem so confounded by potion recipes, it's as if they're written in gobbledygook. A fascinating language, by the way. Neither here nor there, really, but I am a self-taught speaker. Mermaid's beer, good conversation is the enemy of free time. I must return my book, Gateway to the Far Stars, before my next class. Speaking of stars, we'll be in astronomy together. You'll love it. Professor Shaw is fun, but quite clever. See you soon, no doubt. My parents considered keeping me home from school this year after the rumors of rebellion.
Fine job brewing your first Wickenweld potion. But there are many potions yet to learn. This is going to be a busy year.
Why did Professor Sharp say that you had permission to go into his office? Yes, but why does that matter to you? Brilliant! And it matters because you can be a part of something truly creative. I'm Gareth, by the way. Gareth Weasley. Bit of a prodigy with potions, if I do say so myself. Pleasure to meet you. Wait, are you related to Professor Weasley? She's my aunt. keeps too close an eye on me for comfort. Ugh. But she can't be everywhere. Listen, anyone with a troll-sized brain can brew an endurance potion. I'm working on something that's certain to be spectacular. I'm just missing one tiny last ingredient that will add that extra spark.
I suspect that's where I come in.
You're as clever as I hoped. I simply need a single Fupa feather. As you'll already be in Sharp's office with his permission, perhaps you could grab it for me.
I'll get you the fruit feather, as long as you're certain Sharp won't miss it.
I assure you he won't. Fruit feathers aren't that valuable. Wait until you see what I'm brewing.
Professor Sharp said that with a well potion, don't fret if you run out of ingredients. I simply grow most of what I need.
Proficiency in potions are two things that cannot be rushed. Patience
Rebellion.
can be fun.
Professor,
You should have collected the ingredients from finish your potion.
my parents considered keeping me home from school this year after the rumors of a goblin rebellion.
Ooh, where'd Ahmed go?
Professor Sharp must have learned a lot during his time at Aurora.
Fine job brewing your first Wiccan potion. But there are many potions yet to learn. This is going to be a busy year.
I was I'm glad I was able to. You must simply have a knack for.
I hear Professor Sharp say that you had permission to.
He did say that. He wants me to get more ingredients to brew another potion.
Brilliant!
I don't know, Gareth. I don't want to get on.
You won't.
I have enough to worry about collecting the ingredients he wants me to get. I'm afraid I can't help you.
I understand.
Rebellion.
Potion stations organized and free.
Gareth.
Hello again.
Never mind.
Not predict me or project. One answer could result in the unfortunate loss of your eyebrows.
And now we add the mallow sweet, and that's odd. Wait, it's not supposed to. Ah!
Mr. Weasley.
Sorry, Professor.
That'll be points from Gryffindor. Again. A well-prepared ritual wizard always has a few potions on hand.
Wasn't expecting that literally to blow up in my face. It was rather brilliant, though. I better clean up. I brewed an Edorous potion as you asked, Professor.
Glad you managed to stay on task. Not every class is so eventful. I saw Mr. Weasley speaking with you earlier. He can be quite persuasive. Glad you managed to resist. You've done well today. I confess I was skeptical, given the advanced nature of this class and the fact you're a new student.
I'm glad I was able to meet your expectations.
A rare occurrence. And you do well to remember that you're not a potions master quite yet. In addition to having a solid grasp of how to combine various ingredients, you should gain an understanding of the ingredients themselves. Pay particular attention in herbology. The plants you nurture there are often essential to the potions you brew here. Now, I recommend that you find a safe location in which to practice brewing. You cannot leave a hot cauldron simply anywhere, and you can keep that foot a feather. This time, that'll be all. I think each of us has had enough excitement for one day. Class is dismissed.
That was an interesting class. Wasn't precisely what I had in mind, but it was still brilliant. Well, for certain you'd have helped.
I'm glad I avoided trouble. Sharp certainly seemed upset with you.
His bark's worse than his bite. I think deep down he respects my artistic spirit. Sharp may seem gruff, but I bet a few galleons he blew up a potion or two in his day. Best be off. Next time we talk, I promise, fewer explosions.
Ugh, my words are going to reek from Dan's inspiration for the rest of term.
Revelio.
Off on another adventure, are we?
Incentive. Rebellion. Got it. Rebellion.
Oh, hey Kara, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Came in to chill for a bit. I have just like, oh my god, I'm muting that one. Oh, could hear myself twice, literally. Interesting game, like really awesome graphics here.
Yeah, the only downside though is with some of the mods that I have installed, like there's this one where it increases the schedules, or like, so now you see all these people walking around, which that's not like by default in the game, but it also makes it a bit slower. And then there's this guy where every time you give him money, he gets a new instrument.
Yes.
And then he has this like snake oboe, or I don't even know.
Very bizarre. some sort of Middle Ages sorcery game?
It's the Harry Potter game.
Ah, okay. Oh, I heard about that one.
Yeah, let's see.
I was doing some test on BuzzFeed. What is my Patronus? And it was Phoenix. My Patronus
Cool.
is Phoenix.
I got Dolphin.
Dolphin is very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, Ariel, I wanted to talk to you about the idea. I might use it in one of the food for thoughts.
Yeah.
It's a Matryoshka dolls. So I don't know if you know what Matryoshka dolls
Yeah.
are. It's like you
Yeah, the nesting doll.
exactly. And so there is also a villain in Russian fairy tales called Kashey the Immortal. Kashey the Immortal would be this kind of old man who lives forever, and he is basically just like ruling over the lands, stealing brides and stuff like that. So he's not a good guy. So he's considered a sorcerer and a villain. And so the similarities between Kashey and Matryoshka dolls is the nesting part. So Kashey is the immortal because his death is at the tip of the needle, and the needle is hidden inside the egg is hidden inside the duck is hidden inside the fish is hidden inside the lake, and so on. It's like it keeps expanding. And so I was thinking about it. I find out when the first Matryoshka dolls were made, and they were like from 1890 were produced the first nesting dolls.
Oh,
And
really?
yes, it's according to Wikipedia. So I did some, and then Kashey and stories about Kashey the Immortal was 150 years written first story, but obviously it was a folk tale, which was told, by grandmothers to whatever. Like probably also 200-300 years before even. But the first written ones they found in the 150 years before, so 1740 or something like that.
Interesting.
And
I
then
wonder. Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, I wonder what the catalyst was for the production of them.
yeah, that's what also I was thinking, because I talked to my mom about it, and she said the idea behind nesting dolls that they go on indefinitely, like a fractal, basically. So she said there is no smallest nesting dolls. It goes on forever. It's just like you cannot open up the tiniest one, but the idea that inside the tiniest one that you cannot open up, there is even tinier one, and so on. So that's the mythology in there. Like even the one that you cannot unscrew still has something on the inside, and so on. And that the endless, the needle, like all the folks about Kashey, that his the nesting thing is also kind of endless, but it transforms. So the tip of the needle never ends as well. So it gets sharper, 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 like it's forever. So that's why he's immortal, because you can never reach the tip of the needle. It keeps kind of getting sharper and sharper.
Wow,
So
that's really interesting.
yeah, I can find the link about Kashey in Wikipedia. And Russian nesting dolls are really easy to find. Kashey Immortal. Like, it's all I want to do. Kashey the Deathless, he's called. He's the Deathless.
That's a really interesting epithet.
Yeah, like I am massively impressed. So I just posted it in the chat for the people who want to check it out. So I want to explore.
Here, maybe put it in the private chat, and then I'll put it in the public chat because I think it doesn't allow links.
Okay. Done. It's awesome to the point. Like, it's interesting to explore. Yeah, I also wonder, like in Wikipedia, I did not find what inspired the Matryoshka dolls, but I do believe it's that nesting thing. So I really like how I will let me find any passage about his death. Oh, hold on, I think it's the movie. Oh no, I sent you the movie. I need the character itself. So,
And I'll be right back. I just need to check something on the stove.
mm-hmm.
So what made you think to start looking into this?
We talked about fractals. Actually, we talked about psychology, where we thought there is no true motive for doing anything. So behind every surface motive, there is an inner motive. And when you unpack the inner motive, there is even inner motive and so on. So it goes like psychologically, the true motives are not the surface motives. They're like motive inside them. It's a nesting sort of thing. And the idea about the cachet was I'm trying to find also, as I'm so talking to you, trying to find the real villain. Cachet the Deathless. It's interesting how. Oh yeah, I found that. Okay, so he's just a cachet. So I will give you the proper link because the other one was a movie based on the folk tale. That one there. Okay, hold on. I'll be right back.
No worries. I'm back.
Sorry. Yeah. So I sent you the real cachet. Cachet the Deathless was the movie based on Cachet, but the idea is basically of the nesting. The death is what is interesting about him. It's that needle hidden in an egg, the egg in a duck, the duck in a hair, the hair in a chest, the chest buried or high up on a tree on an island, and so on. It's like really interesting to me, that endless kind of thing inside the thing inside the thing.
Yeah, let me see if I can find something about that. Let's see.
Hey, Yellow Psych.
Hey, Mateus, how are you doing? Right now, this is really interesting. I don't know if you just got here, but Kara's been talking about this idea that's like just real. I don't know how to explain it doing it justice, but okay, let's see. Okay, here I found. Well, that's too long. Let me see if I can find something that's not so long. Ooh, this might be good. I could just put it on fast forward a bit.
Yeah, give me some dap.
I gotta give you a prop.
NFL pro turned tech.
But like, the idea is psychology, because death is fear, and the fear you hide. Like, so we talked about unwinding psychological reasoning behind the action, and if we think it's ego, or we think it's a failure or something like this, if we will unscrew all of those nesting parts and we come to the tiniest ultimate reason, it would mostly be fear of something. So that's how we came to the death of Koshchei and Matryoshka dolls. and how they're
Interesting.
connected.
Yeah, it's kind of like, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But if you hide it
People
well,
across the
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but just because you hide it doesn't mean it's not there.
Exactly.
world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. In modern fantasy stories, the archetype of an evil sorcerer is among the most common of characters. Arguably, the earliest example of a dark wizard with awe-inspiring magical powers and an aptitude for cruelty comes from Slavic mythology and Russian folktales. A figure known as Koschei, the Deathless. Though his physical appearance is rarely given in great detail, he is often described as old, ugly, and decrepit, with many depictions of him showing him as a gaunt individual, like a skeleton with flesh wrapped tightly across the
It's
bone.
interesting. He's almost like
Other accounts portray him as a tall, gangly man with long white hair and a beard, with stories and art showing him riding his enchanted horse,
powerful,
fully nude across the steppes of Russia.
And there,
Through endless study and gruesome experimentation, Koschei the Deathless was a powerful sorcerer, with an assortment of magical powers and artifacts at his command. He could change his shape and may appear as a giant, as a fearsome beast, a handsome man, or a whirlwind. There are tales of him changing others into various creatures such as frogs or snakes, into stone or ice, or even into walnuts. Others into various as a fearsome beast, a handsome man, or a whirlwind. There are tales of him changing others into various creatures such as frogs or snakes, into stone or ice, or even into walnuts. He could defy gravity, fly across the land at great speeds, place people under a deep sleep or into a deep trance, enchant any woman he so desired, and kill any foe with the slightest incantation. By all accounts, Koschei should have nothing to fear. And yet, there was one thing that filled him with dread: his own death. Utilizing dark magic from a bygone era, Koschei cast a spell to remove his soul from his body, and placed it within a needle. He then hid the needle inside of an egg, the egg inside of a duck, the duck in a hare, the hare in a large iron chest, the chest buried beneath a green oak tree on the mystical island of Buyan, said to disappear upon the tide. Should anyone succeed in finding the island, the tree upon it, and the chest buried underneath,
holy crap,
the hare would run.
It almost seems like Rowling completely ripped off the idea of this in order to come up with Horcruxes.
Yeah, I know. The Harry Potter massively stole from it. That's why, I was like, that's the tale I'm as a child was hearing when I was. By the way, the idea with enchantment, the needle, the egg, the duck, and the hare comes from Tatar, some from Turkish also amulets that they were using. That they would have a complex protective amulet that would protect you against death, and they would give it to sultans and stuff.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
It within a needle. He then hid the needle inside of an egg, the egg inside of a duck, the duck in a hare, the hare in a large iron chest, the chest buried beneath a green oak tree on the mystical island of Buyan, said to disappear upon the tide. Should anyone succeed in finding the island, the tree upon it, and the chest buried underneath, the hare would run. Should the hare be killed, the duck would escape on the air. So long as the needle and its egg capsule remained intact, Koschei would be safe from any and all harm done to his body, granting him the title, Koschei the Deathless. But should his enemy reach the egg, Koschei's life would be truly endangered. According to myth, possession of the egg alone was enough to gain control of the sorcerer. Should the egg be broken, particularly upon Koschei's forehead, the needle within it would break as well, forcing hundreds of years of age down upon Koschei in a single instant, obliterating him, vanquishing the villain once and for all. Koschei acts as the antagonist of a number of Russian folktales collected in Andrew Lang's The Red Fairy Book and Alexander Afanasov's Russian Fairy Tales. The stories that feature Koschei often have him pursuing young women who are disgusted by him, and entail just how cruel he can be towards others, how powerful his magic is, particularly when in pursuit of that which he desires, and of how he eventually, inevitably dies. In the story of Tsarevich Peter, Koschei abducted the Tsaritsa of Tsar Belyanin. After weeks of searching, the Tsar's council informed him that the Tsaritsa was abducted by the evil wizard. They told the Tsar that to battle Koschei and attempt to rescue his wife, would be futile. For Cachet's realm and his castle were beyond 3 times 9 lands, with the most splendid palaces atop the highest, most inaccessible mountains in Russia, with each palace surrounded by enchantment. Heartbroken, yet determined to save his wife, the Tsar sent criers into far-off kingdoms, offering wealth and honors to whomever could save the Tsaritsa. Daring heroes and great generals came in response from all sides, each promising valiant deeds. And Tsar Belyanin bade each take from the royal treasury sufficient gold for their needs. But those scores arrived and thus rode away. There came no news of the missing Tsaritsa. On the brink of madness and poverty, the Tsar's 3 sons, Alexei, Dmitri, and Peter, all came to their father's aid. The Tsar sent out his eldest son Alexei, and when he returned without success, the Tsar sent out his second son Dmitri, who, like his brother, failed to find Cachet and the Tsaritsa. So the youngest son, Peter, set off to succeed where his brothers failed, to find the sorcerer and rescue his mother. After overcoming a series of natural and mystical obstacles, and with the aid of his crafty mother and some animal friends, Peter learns of and recovers the soul trapped within the egg. He then smashes it upon Cachet's forehead, saving his mother, the Tsaritsa, in addition to other beautiful captive maidens found in Cachet's dwellings. In the tale of Ivan Sosnovich, Cachet learns of 3 beautiful maidens in a far-off tsardom, saved from the underworld by Ivan and his compatriots. He then proceeded to slay 2 of the maidens betrothed while dismembering a third, kidnapping the 3 women, and petrifying the rest of the kingdom. When Ivan hears of what happened, he and a team of excavators travel far into the highest mountains where Cachet made his lair to find the enchanted chest, this time buried beneath a mountain. Upon finally discovering the egg that held his soul, Ivan smashed it, killing Cachet and freeing the maidens before he saved the kingdom with the use of an enchanted guzli. Interestingly, the most prominent tale of Cachet the Deathless had nothing to do with the needle in the egg. At some point in time, Cachet was defeated by the warrior Maria Morevna and was imprisoned in a high tower, bound in a dozen chains behind a locked door, bereft of nourishment to drain his strength. 10 years later, Maria chose to go to war and left her husband, Ivan, in charge of the house, warning him not to set foot behind a certain door,
Hey, Graham.
for there was a secret she had long kept locked away there. But humans are a curious race, and Ivan was no exception. When Maria left, Ivan disobeyed her request and ventured behind the door, where he then met a decrepit curious race, and Ivan was no exception. When Maria left, Ivan disobeyed her request and ventured behind the door, where he then met a decrepit old man locked in place with a dozen chains, not knowing the man's true identity or his villainous nature. The old man begged Ivan for water, having been deprived of food and drink for a decade. Feeling sympathetic for him, Ivan provided the man with a dozen barrels of water. Almost immediately, the man was fully revived and restored, the weak shell withering away to reveal the powerful and nigh invincible sorcerer that was Cachet. Empowered, Cachet broke free of the chains that bound him and declared revenge upon his captor Maria, and vanished into thin air, his magic as fully restored as his body. Ivan at once embarked on a mission to rescue Maria, finding her and fleeing with her twice, only to be overcome both times by Cachet on his much faster steed. Ivan tried to battle Cachet, but this only resulted in him being slashed to ribbons and thrown into a barrel into the sea. However, Ivan cheated death, as his 3 beloved sisters each had married powerful sorcerers, who located and revived the man. Ivan was then instructed to retrieve a magic horse, one that could travel as fast, if not, as his 3 beloved sisters each had married powerful sorcerers, who located and revived the man. Ivan was then instructed to retrieve a magic horse, one that could travel as fast, if not faster than Cachet, from Baba Yaga, an old cannibalistic sorceress who lived in a remote hut on chicken legs. He successfully completed the tasks Baba Yaga gave to him over the course of 3 days. Ivan then stole Baba Yaga's fastest horse and raced off to Maria, determined to save her from Cachet's clutches. When Ivan caught up with Cachet and Maria, he at last defeated the wizard. But unlike the other stories featuring Cachet, instead of him being defeated by the breaking of the needle in the egg, he was slain by either Ivan's sword or a sharp kick to the head by Ivan's steed, depending on the version. Regardless, the sorcerer's body was properly burned, and Cachet was finally dead.
So I'm getting almost this idea that, like, so it never says that Cachet is, but it almost, there's like this serpent-like imagery that's associated with him, or like dragon-like imagery. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like this idea of, what is it, like abducting women, having this giant kingdom. But the main thing that I kind of noticed, and given that this is not so much connected to the idea of the dragon, but you definitely see it get syncretized with it later in Christian tradition. But this idea of basically, the old man or the father of time getting turned into the devil. And
Mm-hmm.
so like this whole imagery of him being in a dungeon locked in chains, like held up by the chains, and he's kind of like almost in this stasis where he's not dead but he's also not living, and the act of giving him water grants him this life that allows him to break free. And it's almost like this idea that you can defeat him but you can't destroy him.
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah, I'm unmuted. I was typing the ground. Yeah, the legends, they're kind of similar across culture. Like there was a dragon, you're right, that was stealing maidens. When I listen to it now, it feels like he has everything. So he's uh, a powerful sorcerer, but the only thing he's like really missing is love. So he keeps stealing young maidens. So he's like after that as well. I kind of see it as weakness because this became his doom in a sense. He's always defeated by somebody who comes after him because he stole a woman. So nothing else he was doing would not bother people. Like he would burn lands and steal things and be just generally a very dangerous individual. But the moment he steals an important woman, then he gets defeated. So that was funny to me somehow.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see this this representation of like maybe not class conflict, but the differences between different classes. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, it's it's horrible that this still goes on, but like in America and in the Americas in general, and I mean, you have this throughout the world, but specifically in America, you have like this epidemic of indigenous women going missing, and they're not just going missing, they're being kidnapped and murdered. But the thing is that there just isn't the vested interest in solving these cases that there is if they happen to be white. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look into all these cases with the same severity when the person happens to be white. It just means we should apply that same severity when the person doesn't happen to be white. But it's kind of like obviously in America, like it's not as simple as that. So basically, if you're famous or you have money, it doesn't matter what color you are. But the point is that generally there is this kind of, and I mean, I think a lot of it just has to do with the way that people are trained to like put value. And again, it's more of a societal problem than anything, but that, if you put value on people based off of, like, I don't know. It's like it's really disgusting, but you're kind of like, well, this person is somehow more valuable just because they're able to do this or that. But in general, a lot of the value that we put on in society is not even based in meritocracy. It's more so just based in like aesthetics or in kind of like very, very shallow things. I don't know. At least that's been a lot of my experience just with elements of American culture. But then again, I think that part of this is just something that is probably human.
Yeah. Shallow, privileged, easily noticeable. Like I was thinking books of Jane Austen had been popular because she would just put a price tag on every person based on those shallow things like a status. So he would be a young man who is about to inherit this and this fortune. She was a young woman, unmarried, in the prospects of inheriting or not inheriting this and this fortune. So The way she would present a character would be always like that, through kind of evaluating a human being based on status and fortune. And I guess later it became also based on color of the skin. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of those things where like everyone has elements of this, and it's kind of one of those things where that is one of maybe the equalizing things that, again, it doesn't mean that all biases are, made equal, but if everyone has biases, then that means that it's not like, there's just one, what, well, and that's kind of the thing. Like when you're talking about humanity, there really is no such thing as a group of people outside of everyone that a certain thing applies to. So it's kind of like there's a lot of people who they'll want to generalize about, one population or another, when in reality it's like, well, say you're talking about people who are violent criminals. You should only be talking about violent criminals, not implying that certain people are just because of, X, Y, or Z. Like, and I think that's kind of one of those things where just because of how politicized language, I mean, I guess always really has been, but especially how it's become, it's almost to the point where those types of conversations are just kind of hapless because all they do is muddy the waters further. I don't know. It's like one of those things where I think that the only thing that's able to really stop that type of division is having like honest conversations, and that's the type of thing that's really hard to do online, but is also one of the things that has to be done online because we're so limited by our own geographical areas that I don't know. It's like one of those. It's a double-edged sword.
I am doing, I'm trying to help with that. The honest conversations part. So the difficult conversations as well, where we name things as they are. Let's say the idea, like I was talking about nonviolent communication. And thank you for being the guest, by the way. I know it was after your almost 6 hours another stream. You did great, man. I was like, I'm very tired after 2 hours already. Like, and you'd go in 7 hours long. It's awesome. Uh, the honest conversations that I noticed. The idea of nonviolent communication is different between men and women because men can actually go into violence and women have no other option. Basically, if it's violence between somebody who is like much stronger than you, I have no chance. I literally, like, the tools I can have other to hit below the belt, which I don't do. I just don't do. I walk or to to do it non-violently, and yet non-violent communication is something that is should work both ways as well. And I noticed that I was trying to explain to a much bigger and stronger guy why nonviolent communication is important, and he was like, "No, everything can be decided with violence." I was like, "No, like some people cannot, just simply cannot be violent. They have no strength." And I mean, it's so that differences between people, and to have conversation about that.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting though because given it's not really the way that people tend to view it nowadays, just because of I mean, honestly, I don't even know why you have this case. But basically, it used to be where wisdom was. I mean, I'm sure Graham probably has what is it? Like some nuance on this, but generally, that wisdom or knowledge was understood as being a feminine trait, whereas strength was seen as more masculine. And I think that one thing that you're kind of talking about is that because you don't have the same ability to rely on violence, which I think in a lot of ways it's also similar to when you have communities that aren't able to oppress other communities, how their culture tends to not be as given you still do have mirroring, but it like you don't tend to have this same level of like total oppression, and a lot of it has to do with this, like if you're the underdog, you're more aware of what it feels like to be an underdog. I don't know if that's really a good comparison, but
Mm-hmm.
basically with this association, what is it with with basically having to use intellect in order to solve problems that other people would just solve with violence. I think that that's probably responsible for some of this, what we see as a masculine feminine divide when it comes to certain like mental or physical traits, when in reality, people, men and women, and, people who don't identify as either are capable of expressing all of those traits. It's just that we have this societal association because of basically the way that um, the was it like basically the way that society was shaped as a result of human biology. And that, again, not to say that like that means that things are predetermined, or that X will be Y, and so on and so forth. I think it's just that um, I don't know. It's one of those things that I think that we I mean, because it is so culturally ingrained, it's important to like, acknowledge that, but at the same time to realize that just because someone's a man doesn't mean they can't embrace this idea of feminine knowledge. And just because someone's, a woman, and again, you don't have to be either, but basically, regardless of what you identify as, you can embrace these elements of masculine strength or feminine wisdom. But again, there's also these like parallels where you have like masculine wisdom and feminine strength, and that's kind of the whole idea, that it's on this, it's on a scale. It's not like a binary thing, and I think that's where a lot of people end up getting lost.
Hmm. That's a good point. Hi, Graham.
Hey,
Hi,
Graham.
Tom.
Hi everyone. No, you're dealing with some interesting stuff that I've explored a lot as well. I was gonna say a lot of it talking to other people. I see it in cultures. I see two aspects involved. I see sort of an invariant part between cultures, and then I see parts that's like adapted to time and place. It's like rules about marriage, rules about stealing. All of those you're going to find cross culturally. The fact that you have them universal, the form that they take is going to be different. Does that make sense to you guys? Tag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go and finish this video, and then I can stream the game again.
With so many differing accounts of who kills Cachet and how it is done, it can be hypothesized that it could have been different beings, all with the same powers, undergoing the same name and the same titles. Or even that Cachet returns from the grave sometime after his defeats. Regardless of who defeats him and how, Cachet the Deathless remains a fascinating figure of Slavic mythology. With nearly unmatched magical prowess, unparalleled cruelty and greed, and nigh immunity to physical harm, it is of no wonder that he appears so frequently in myths and fairy tales of Russia, making him among the most enduring and most popular villains in folklore.
Awesome. Thank you. That was interesting.
Yeah, no, Koshi the Deathless and Baba Yaga, those are, that's just some of the fun part in Slavics. Part of the stuff that I always enjoyed was the Bouillon and the Alatar, the rock and Bouillon. And
Yeah.
that's sort of that mysterious island. And again,
Yeah.
one of the aspects of that's unusual about the Slavic mythology is the role that birds play. Birds are very, very prominent, like carrying souls and stuff to the afterlife and all. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a much that's like an older, that I found that's an older tradition than some of the other ones that came later. So tagging out on that.
So, Buyan, means something that moves. By the way, like the translation of buyan is a wave. There, back, there. So this is buyaj. This means to kind of wiggle, shake, not shake. It's like a wave, friction wave.
Interesting.
And the island itself, I think it appears only once in a full moon or something like that. It's even like more complicated. So the island itself appears and disappears. Yeah, Baba
So-
Yaga. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say it. Wait, shoot, what was this? Oh yeah, the idea of shoot, what is it? Where about birds carrying the souls into the afterlife. That seems to echo like these Tangri or what is it? The animist traditions of the like of the people of the steppe, where you have this tradition of sky burial. You know what I'm talking about?
Interesting. Sky burial. Burial in the sky. Birds having wings. Birds having the ability to fly far.
Yeah. So what they'll do is they'll leave the remains exposed on these like almost these like shacks or these huts, and the what is it? The carrion birds, so like vultures and eagles, will pick the bones clean, and and that so yeah, I think that the flesh is kind of associated with the part of the the basically the part of the body that um, that doesn't stay on Earth after basically because it decomposes. And so the idea is that by having the birds as the ones that eat the flesh, they're taking they're taking the soul up to the heavens. I don't know enough about the tradition, but like that's a basic outline. I probably got a few things wrong, but it's definitely interesting because then you have the bones that I think they would they would put in ossuaries, like in these bone boxes, and they would carry it with them. Though I might be wrong about that. Actually, so I do remember there is this one tradition about the burial of, I think it was Genghis Khan, though I might be wrong. It might have been another Khan. But basically, that they had this army that, or like this army detachment that went off to I forget if they had a place built for it or if it was just this one like cave or whatever. But basically, they deposited the Kagan or the Khan's bones there, and then basically they killed all of they killed themselves off so that no one would know the location of where he was buried. It's a really interesting story.
The way that I heard the Genghis Khan one was a little different, Ariel. I heard it was basically a two-stage operation where you had two groups depart from a location, and both groups then encamped at a location nobody back at the city knew. One of the groups camps there, one departs for where the burial site's going to be, which the group behind doesn't know. The group then does the burial at a location that's similar to Koshi the Deathless, that's double hidden. And then when after Genghis Khan was buried, that group came back, and as soon as they came back, the first group, the camped group, slaughtered the barriers. After they were slaughtered, the group in the encampment went back to back to civilization. And as soon as they got back, they were slaughtered. And that's how the tomb of Genghis Khan got buried beneath two levels of ignorance. Taken out.
Yeah, that's like I said, I don't remember the details as accurately, but yeah, that what you said, that's more or less what I was talking about. But yeah, so like, what do you think it is with like, what is it with this tradition of, trying to occlude the burial site of a famous person who in some contexts could have even been, revered as a god. And you have this, is it almost in order to, do you think I don't know enough about the traditions, but it almost seems like you could argue that it's an attempt for deification, because you could argue, well, his body was taken up to heaven or something. I really don't know the context for what they could have or would have argued, but what's the reason for literally spending all this money and effort just to kill these people?
One part is to prevent like grave robbing and desecration of the body later. It's like in ancient Assyria, it's basically if the king needed to pass the power on. So if the king had died in battle rather than within Assyria, it was basically a breach and you couldn't have a new king. That's why at the end you had the after the fall of Nineveh, they basically took the I think it was Nineveh, but they basically took the king hostage, and then he died, and then the crown prince kept going from Haran as basically the final last stand of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Tagging.
Sorry, guys, I have to go.
No worries.
Also to see.
Have a great day. Take care. It was good to see you.
Great to see you, Kara. Great as always, Kara.
Bye.
Bye. So, yeah, let me see if I can find something else that's... Actually, you know what? We're talking about these evil sorcerers / people with power. Let's talk about Haman. Let's see. Okay, why is there so much crap? There is so much crap. Crap. Crappity crap. Let's see. What on earth? Why did someone make a parody of What Does the Fox Say? What Does Haman Say? Please, no. Bludgeon me with a spoon.
I was going to say the reason why there's so much crap was I learned the Sturgeon's law. 90% of everything is crap.
Let's see.
He's always the ones making those Rav Shaked, Rav Gladstein, and Baruch Hashem, such connections should continue. He should be Matzliach. He should have Sinachat from his family, and Hashem should shower him as he does already. Should continue showering with all the brachot. We want to call up to Rabbi Gladstein, please.
Oh.
Hey, William, what's up? Feel free to join us if you want.
Shabbat Tov, everyone. Reshut Harav Shlita. Thank Rabbi Avi for bringing me this evening, for granting me this chus to be able to share with you Divrei Torah. All the Divrei Torah should be Le'iloi Nishmat Istam Bat Brucha and Brucha Bat Esther. Eliyahu Ben Azdai. They should have a big aliyah Gan Eden. They should have, we say in Yiddish, a lichtige Gan Eden, a very bright Gan Eden. They should be Melitza Yisharim for the whole mishpacha, for Simchas, Bekarov, Nachas, good health, happiness, success. And I thank Rabbi Avi for all of his friendship and support. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should shower on him. You shaking from the vibrations, nothing. Ki'ilu, you never heard of a telephone. Either you learn Torah or you're on the phone. Those are the two options. So here we came for Limud Torah. Please, thank you very much. Okay? I'm not the Rav. I can say whatever I want. You don't want me to come back? I come back next Purim. You forgot what I said. It's okay. Okay, friends, I want to share with you a very interesting question. First of all, tonight is Matzai Shabbat. Matzai Shabbat, you have to say the following two words. Eliyahu Hanavi. We always say Eliyahu Hanavi Matzai Shabbat. In fact, the reason why we talk about Eliyahu Hanavi Matzai Shabbat is because he can't come Friday. We're too busy. He can't come Shabbat. Shabbat, he can't travel outside of the Tchum. So the first time he could come is Matzai Shabbat. So Matzai Shabbat, we like to mention Eliyahu Hanavi. Some poskim say you mention him 9 times. 9 times you have to say Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hanavi. You know the song? Zachor Latov. By the way, Zachor Latov is very interesting. Who in Megillah do we say Zachor Latov? Charbona. Why? Because Charbona was not Charbona. He was Eliyahu Hanavi. So therefore, Charbona is also Zachor Latov. Okay. So Some poskim say we say Eliyahu Navi Zechor Latov. We say it 9 times. Some say 30 times. Arizal says, you know how many times you have to mention Eliyahu Navi? 130 times, Eliyahu Navi. 130 times. Okay, we said him a few times. Bezat Hashem, he should come Bekarov. I want to share with you a very important question on the Megillah. Number 1, you look in the Megillah, Mordechai. First of all, we have to make sure we're recording, because not recording, then nobody knows if it happened, right? So I think we're good. Yeah? Okay. I want to tell you a very interesting question. Mordechai comes, he tells the Jewish people, let's make Purim. We're going to make Mishteh, party, Simcha, happiness, Yom Tov. Yom Tov means Yisur Melacha, you can't do Melacha. And the Jewish people say thanks, but no thanks, we're not interested. We could do Matanot Le'avyonim, we could do Mishloach Manot, we could do Suda, no Yom Tov. We don't want Yom Tov. You hear this? The Gemara says the Jewish people never accepted Purim as a Yom Tov. Why not? So Mekubalim teach, very interesting idea. The reason why the Jewish people did not want Purim to be a Yom Tov, because if it would be a Yom Tov, what would we have to do after Purim? We'd have to make Havdalah, and a Jew can never make Havdalah from Purim. We always have to be connected to Purim. So therefore we said no Yom Tov, so we don't have to make Havdalah. So the whole year we could connect to Purim. But we're going to provide another reason why Purim was never established as a Yom Tov. I want to share with you another question. We have a mitzvah on Purim, Chayiv inish lebesume bepuraya ad lo yada ben arur haman baruch Mordechai. You have to drink so much that you don't know who's a good guy and who's a bad guy.
Oh, one second. I didn't mean to change that. So, no. But yeah, that is this one tradition. And I mean, I personally don't drink that much anymore. But I can say that I will be imbibing something that will make it so. I mean, if anything, that'll be easier to tell the difference between, Mordechai and Haman. But like, you take enough and everything just kind of blurs together. And that's kind of the point. That this like almost antinomian nature of it, that the good is the bad and the bad is the good. But then again, it doesn't like it also kind of goes with this whole theme of like jest and and joy. It's like for instance, even there's depictions of Haman, and when he's being hung, he's depicted as like laughing, and it's kind of, honestly, the whole story is kind of a trip if you think about it, but that's another story.
If, let's say, you didn't know that this was in the halacha, and you sent your kid to yeshiva, and you say, Yaakov, what did you learn today in yeshiva? My rabbi told me I have to drink so much on Purim that I don't know the difference between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai. You immediately take him out of the yeshiva and register him in I don't know where. What kind of halacha is this? This is a good idea. Every bad thing that ever happened in our history came from drinking too much. Adam HaRishon, the Adam HaRishon. What did he eat? He ate Eitz Hadat. What was the Eitz Hadat? It's anavim, grapes. He had Kiddush Club. Ar Chaim HaKadosh says, God wanted him to eat from the Eitz Hadat, but only Friday night on Shabbat. He made an early Kiddush Club. That's why that's why you see people leave the shul for Kiddush Club. What are they doing? They're following in the way of Nachash HaKadmoni, bringing Kilkul l'chol ha'olam kula. That's what Adam HaRishon did. Next guy who drank wine, Noach. He comes out of the teva. He drinks too much wine. So all the problems that ever happened in wine, and comes Purim, and all of a sudden we have to drink a lot. What's the meaning of this? Do you have chumashim that you could look at the Megillah inside? Yeah, we could do that. We're taking a break now. We're going to give out these chumashim. Everyone should see the Megillah inside. Don't take my word for it. Okay, hand them out. It's in the back. The rabbi's going to tell you what page it's on. Megillat Esther. You could take. What is that? Slichot? No slichot. Kinot? No. Okay. What page is it on? We encounter in Megillat Esther. Yeah, you give to the ladies also, because they're not going to believe me. Let them take. You have. See for yourselves. Okay, I'll take one. Thank you. What page, Rabbi? What page? 1252. Okay. Here we go. Number 1, the Gemara tells us that Megillat Esther was written B'Ruach HaKodesh, with the Holy Spirit, which means that every single word and every letter is specific. We're allowed to ask, why was this word written? Why was this letter written? And we read Megillat Esther, and we encounter in Megillah a number of anomalies, a very unusual way the words were written. So let's look in Pasuk Vav, the 6th Pasuk of the Megillah. Chur. You look at the word Chur, we have a big chet. Why is there a big chet in the Megillah? Why is there a big chet? There's a big chet. You go to the end of the Megillah, Parak Tes, Pasuk Chav Tes. This is on page 1261. Parak Tes, Pasuk Chav Tes. We have a big tuf. So we have a big ches in the beginning of Megillah, a big tuf in the end of Megillah. What's the reason for this? So the Roikeach was one of the great Rishonim who explains the secrets of the Torah. He says the reason why we have a big chet, we just read in this week's parsha, that the Kohen Gadol wears how many begadim? 8. Achashverosh put on.
So this is interesting. So Rokeach, it means like a compounder, or like like a pharmacist. Any thoughts on that? I mean, not that specifically, but just everything so far.
It's interesting. As far as that one, I would sit there and say more alchemist than pharmacist. especially dealing with back then. One thing I think is worth noting there, and again, I haven't seen much exploration of it, is the difference between beer and wine, and that being where wine shows up later in the text as opposed to getting drunk shows up earlier. Since beer dates from about 13,000 years ago, and wine only dates to about 8,000 years ago.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So there is a word that's used as zetom, which is Egyptian beer.
And I was wondering, I didn't think that they specified like Noah got drunk on wine. They said he got drunk, but I don't remember it specifying wine.
I think it's probably the fruit of the vine.
Well, again, that's one of those. You're the linguist here. And, much more connection to the original text as well by tradition.
So actually, also, I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but I was talking to someone about this, and actually happened to the idea popped in my head to look for references to. Well, I need to provide context, but let me see it first. So let's see Noah. Let's see wine. Let's see. Genesis 9. Let's see. Genesis 9. Let's see. All right. One moment. Okay, so Noah, the tiller of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard, a kerem. Vayisht, and he drank min hayayin, from the wine. Vayishkar, and he became drunk. So yeah, the word is yayin.
Okay, so that would be Noah would be when wine enters the Jewish tradition. And that makes sense since they're saying that wine, the earliest traces of wine are very much in Georgia and Armenia. And Armenia. So that would be consistent with like the Caucasus Mountains and Mount Ararat.
How long ago did they discover this? Or not discover, but how long ago do they date it to?
They date the wine from Georgia to circa 6,000 BC. You have it in Persia a millennia later, and then Armenia about 4,100.
So now think about it this way. This guy's saying, and I think I do remember a Jewish tradition about this, given I would probably push back on it, that there's something else, or that it's wine that's been infused with something. And so when they talk about the fruit of, the fruit of the wine becomes the grape, even if there's other things that are infused in it that are giving it the effect. But the point, though, is there is this one tradition, that the world is 6,000 years old. Now, what if that's just referring to this creation or, ordering, or essentially the 6,000 year, or, like 6, 7, or 5, 7, 7, like we're almost on 6,000 years, that basically that could be understood as, and given it's not a perfect parallel because 6,000 years ago would have been what, 4,000 BC or so. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that it's figurative, and that really what we're talking about with the creation of the world, or the creation of Adam and Eve, is probably just the creation of what we now understand as modern humans. Not like modern humans biologically, but modern humans culturally.
No, I think 100% you knock it out of the park there, Ariel. It's a question of resets and recurring resets. Because if you look at it as, this is one of those with, when I was in church, the inaccuracy in the sermon was one where the preacher sat there and said, Abraham was the first reset from Adam. And I was like, No, you had Seth and Noah in between. Both of those were, and that's what it is. It's basically you have a population that diverges, and then the ones that stuck to the path, survive through the reset, and then take over again. So and that's what I'm seeing is an expansion, and then a collapse, and then a collapse down to the core, expansion, collapse down to the core, repeated. And I definitely see that hard reset again, circa 4,000, Anno Mundi, year of the world, happened in roughly that 4,000 BC-ish time period, which was similar like the fall of the Haran culture and all. Tagging out.
Interesting. So, okay, so here I'm trying to find.
Sorry, Harappan culture for reference,
yeah.
not Haran.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I happened to look up, just because, and again, I think that I was talking with someone, and they were mentioning that I can't imagine why this would be heated, but I'm not going to say who, just in case. I don't want to start any more shit, but not that. Anyway, without getting into it, basically that that you have these dueling narratives of Jesus. So you have Jesus is, and that one, and again, no one knows who is the real one, or if there was a real one. At the end of the day, that's not what I'm interested in talking about. It's more so just this narrative of basically. Well, actually, no. So this is something completely different, but it is related. But specifically, what I'm talking about is this idea that, given by the time that the Talmud's being written, you already have people starting to talk about, homosexuality, or specifically like homosexual, or basically gay sex, as wrong or immoral, or there's even ones who call for people to be put to death for it. Again, like, that's super immoral. I'm not justifying that. I don't derive my morality from these texts, and I think that it needs to be clear to people, because apparently there's people who think that I'm defending these texts, but no. So the thing that I did want to bring up, though, is that the prohibition on, what gets understood as a prohibition on gay sex, is that a man shall not lie with a male as he does with a woman. And I've talked about this at length before, that it's formulaic, in that when you're dealing with these ancient languages, you don't have this change of paradigm by accident. It's on purpose. So I happened to, actually, because of the other thing, look up the term pederasty to see if it's mentioned at all, because one of my arguments has been, if this was something that Jesus did in real life, as opposed to just a narrative that was written about him. And again, it's possible there was no real Jesus, and that the narrative is essentially as real as you're going to get. I'm not making claims to any of that, but basically the idea that he would have been a pederast seems like something that the rabbis would have really critiqued him for. And so I just happened to look it up, and you do have mentions of it in the Talmud, and by Rashi, and by Rambam, or Ramban, sorry. But it's interesting, though, because, so here, so Rashi on Deuteronomy 32:16. So here, Tanakh. It's Deuteronomy 32:16. Oh, wait. Shoot. Okay, so here's the things that it's. Okay, so this is interesting. So look at this. So betoiva, it's like with abominations, with abominable deeds such as, and here's the contention. Keep in mind, look at this. This translation, 1929, 1934, we're not dealing with some, hyper politicized, like, people that are trying to defend it now. Given you could argue that, but again, back then, homosexuality was seen as wrong. So why would they opt to change it to this? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of arguments. I would like to speak to a scholar about this at some point, like someone who really knows their shit about this. Someone who knows about sexuality in ancient Israel and in Hellenistic Israel. But like, anyway, here's the point that I'm bringing up. So, betoiva, b'ma'asim, in actions, te'uvim, so in like abominable actions, kegun, what's this? Kagun, such as mishkav zachur. So mishkav means like lying down or bedding, like bedding, and then zachur. And this is from Zachar. But look how it's getting translated. Pederasty. This is saying laying with males. Again, why not laying with men? And the reason is because it's specifying that they're male children. The thing is that it does, like, and again, one of the reasons why I do want to speak to a scholar about this is because I would like to know, is there any, argument as to why they're not using the term, yeled, and actually this might be the reason why they don't, because yeled or yalda, especially when you're dealing with Aramaic, it can become ambiguous. And because the prohibition was specified, again, another thing that we should condemn, but because it was specified that this is talking about males, not females, I mean, it would be kind of interesting if it would have said you shall not lie with a male as you do with a man. But the thing is, just because they might have not been considering all, and again, there's a complete difference between pederasty that happens to be someone with someone of the same sex, completely different than a relationship with someone who is, an adult and is consenting. And this is the thing, when you're dealing with linguistics from thousands of years ago, you're going to have to go through these, it's a lot of muck. And the thing is that there's a lot of people who I think are just either afraid to, step into it because they're afraid of getting muck on themselves. But like, at the end of the day, I'm more interested in trying to get to the truth. And part of the reason is just imagine how different, the world would be if, I'm trying to think, and given this is, it's a pipe dream, but imagine if it would have never been interpreted this way. Imagine it would have been, literally, just think about this. If Deuteronomy, part of the Torah, the Pentateuch, one of the, holiest books, supposedly to the Catholic Church. And again, I'm not, saying that all Catholics are guilty of this. This is, completely on the leadership. But imagine if it would have been enshrined, you shall not abuse children. You shall not be a pederast, rather than you shall not lie with a man. Holy crap, how different the world could have been. And again, I'm not trying to erase what history actually did happen, because that's the real abomination. Well, that and pederasty, but the point is not the way that people have translated it. And again, people could argue that this is apologetics, but the truth is no, because I guess you could say that defending what the actual Jewish stance is, or the way that it could be understood based on the Hebrew. And again, this is also one of the things I would actually conjecture beyond just this, that multiple parts of, the Torah have been misunderstood, and multiple parts of Tanakh have been misunderstood. And I don't think that we should be relying solely on rabbis for this understanding, because at the end of the day, they're only getting one perspective. I don't think that perspective is invalid, but it needs to be, assimilated with the rest of the understandings, because there is this understanding that there are 70 faces to the Torah. And if you're only looking at one face, you're completely missing a majority of it. You're missing 69 faces. Any thoughts on that? My throat's sore. Or not sore, but dry.
No problem. I didn't want to interrupt you while you were rolling. You were on a good roll there. No,
But
a lot of the stuff you're dealing with, it's one of those where I was talking about earlier about that invariant core and then time and place. And I see two factors going in here from a spiritual tradition standpoint. One of those, if we're talking post reset, Adam and Eve, Noah, with that whole be fruitful and multiply. And again, I'm pulling from some of my Catholic tradition with the idea of where homosexuality is wrong because basically every sex act should have the potential to create a new life. And from that standpoint, that's where from under the be fruitful and multiply principle, that is one of the reasons homosexuality was banned from the religion. You're also dealing at the end there with what I see as basically the tripod of religious truth that scriptural faiths tend to have, because you have the truth of the written word, you have the truth as it's understood by the priests / rabbis, and then you have the truth as it's understood by each individual within themselves. And it's a question of when those three all agree, everything's wonderful. Religion runs flawlessly. But it's when one of them is out of line with the other two, or if all three are out of whack. And it becomes which is the one that's going to be given the precedence. And you can see where sects start based off of which part of the triad is being given the precedence over the other two by the sect that's splintering off. Tag to see if any of that works for you, Ariel.
yeah, so I mean, I think that's a key point to point out that in terms of, and again, I don't think that this is something that we should agree. Or I mean, you can choose to agree with this, but at the end of the day, I mean, I don't get my morals from the Bible. I mean, I'm inspired by elements of the Bible, but not by the Bible in general, because, oh shoot, 1 second. But I guess the key point though is that where is it going at that? Shoot, what was it about? Right, from a Jewish and from a Christian. Again, this is from like a Orthodox standpoint, but from a Jewish and a Catholic standpoint, the reason why, and this is the only reason, literally the only reason why it was seen as bad, and again, actually not necessarily the reason why it was so like for instance, in some Islamic societies, it was a bit more nuanced, but European society, like Christian society, got very, very homophobic, and then Jewish society had a lot more nuance. Like you have this acknowledgement of different types of genders in the Talmud, but where was I going with this? Basically the reason why it's seen as, and again, I maybe like, I mean, a lot of rabbis will say it's bad, but like based off of the logic, maybe not bad, but seen as not productive, which again isn't good, and I think we should condemn that type of language. But it's very functional. They look at it as you have to have at least 2 kids. If you don't have 2 kids, you're not fulfilling your obligation to God. And again, we should question that narrative as well, because why does someone have to have 2 kids? What if they raise 2 kids? What if they are a teacher and they invest all their energy into teaching kids? Like I think that this is kind of one of those things where it's about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. But basically that a gay man is seen no differently in Jewish and Catholic tradition likely than a woman who is unmarried and having sex, right?
Well, they're both sinners. It's different types of sin.
Okay, so I'm trying to think. Okay, no. say someone who's having a lot of sex, but they're on birth control and, you know, using protection so that there's no way that they can get pregnant. So basically, and again, there still technically is a way, but for the sake of the argument, let's say that they can't. So in both cases, you're dealing with non-procreative sex. That's the issue. It's not that someone is gay or that someone is, you know, a promiscuous woman. It's literally just this idea of non-procreative sex, which again goes back to this core idea of why do you need to have a bunch of kids? Well, it's in order to grow the community. And why do you have to grow the community? So that you're not a minority. And I mean, you have this within every tradition. So I think that
you did one of the problematic things by saying it's only the procreative sex. That's not even close to all that's involved there. One of, if not as much of a factor, is the bonding between partners. And the idea that sex is supposed to be a bonding between two partners. And if you're being promiscuous, regardless of if it's with a man or a woman, you're violating that bond between the two. And that's entirely separate than procreative sex.
Okay, so
tagging out on that.
Okay, so to fix the comparison, so you're in a committed relationship, but you're a gay man, and I'm not saying you, I'm just saying, you know, in this statement, but basically you have a gay man who's in a relationship with another gay man, and they're having sex, and there's no way they can get pregnant. And then you have, let's say, a man and a woman, and then they're both using birth control, like say the woman's on the pill and the guy's wearing a condom, and then basically, let's say that for all statistical purposes, it's next to impossible that they're going, like, regardless of whether they do or not, the intent is that they're not. And so, like, given well, in one case you have the ability to get pregnant, but they're purposefully not, like, from the standpoint of, like, and this is a key thing that I think there's the, like, just based off of what's in the text as opposed to how these ideas come about, I think that they're probably let's see, what's this? Nick said it's important to investigate how original meanings have been twisted in the past. It's not apologetics or defending Christian theology. Thank you. I was
going to say the term that I thought of in that one was, you know, instead of apologetics, it's explainogetics, where you're not trying to make excuses for it. You're just trying to explain what's actually there.
I mean, I see where you're coming from, but I still think the term could just be misused. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, you're not even doing anything that's close to apologetics if you're, and this is the thing, like, I think that the way to separate it from apologetics is to condemn the texts when they're wrong, as opposed to saying, well, it was just a different time. Because, yeah, it was a different time, but that doesn't mean we can't say that it's wrong and that it's, you know, reprehensible.
I was going to say, here I feel a need to draw a distinction between us, Ariel. You're willing to do that condemnation. I'm not. I'm willing to say this is what the text says. I'm not willing to take that extra step and condemn it. Tag.
I mean, maybe not condemn it, but contextualize it and say, like, you know, it's unacceptable. This is why it doesn't happen today. But at the same time, like, when you're dealing with something that's just so, like, for instance, if you're,
here's my issue with my research and my autism. What objective metric do I use for something being acceptable or not? I can sit there and note that the people in the past found it acceptable. I can note that the people in the present find it unacceptable. But I have to say, you have that you know, in the past and in the current difference in metric. So it's like, I don't know how to sit there and take that extra step to declare it as unacceptable. You see what I'm saying there?
Okay, what about, like, putting people to death for their religious beliefs? Can we condemn that?
Well, certainly in the modern context. We can sit there and bemoan it, be disgusted by it. We can question in the past, but it's that condemning, I can't go there. And I don't understand how other people manage to work themselves up and are able to, because it simply seems like that's, again, part of that whole critical theory, divide and conquer, us versus them. Us moderns know our shit. Those poor, stupid, ignorant ancients. And it's like, man, those ancients
No,
were
that
smart. Yeah.
that's exactly my argument, though. They aren't different from us. So to think that we should give them a pass because they're in the past, I think that's ridiculous. Because we're making the same mistakes as they did then, and we're supposed to be so civilized now. So how do you explain that? The reason is because people are human, and we need to condemn actions that are done by humans, regardless of when they happen. Obviously there's nothing we can do about the past, but I think that when for instance, when if someone teaches about the Holocaust, don't you think it's responsible for them to condemn the actions of the Nazi regime?
Well, yeah, but I think you need to point out exactly what the actions were and why they were wrong, and be willing to sit there and examine and say, things like the I forget off the top of my head, but it's like the Nazi that had the plot to blow up Hitler that failed. You can sit there, and what I think is it becomes too much of a lump and dump. Nazis bad, all Nazis bad, blanket condemnation, and
That's
anybody
not.
who, and I didn't say you were. I'm saying this is something I think desperately needs to be avoided, because if you bury that under a blanket of secrecy and silence that you never look under again, you're close to dooming yourself to repeating it. Because if you don't learn from the past mistakes and why they happened, you end up repeating them until you learn not to. And do you see why that's so bothersome to me, Ariel?
Yeah, but I specifically specified that this idea of looking through things individually and for instance, condemn things for things that happen, not things that didn't. It's kind of like if you're going to go and say, "Oh, the evil Israelites for genociding the Canaanites." Well, it's like, so that didn't historically happen. There's no evidence of that. You have the only way to argue that that happened is if you believe the Bible. And if you're believing the Bible, then it's like at that point, you're still stuck in that paradigm.
Well, now you're sitting there and trying to pin beliefs with facts. And that can never work. Beliefs don't require facts. As soon as you start requiring facts, you've moved into a territory that's not actually belief. And if you're in a middleman's ground, in the no man's land in the middle, where you want to hang on to your beliefs, in the face of facts, but you want to pick and choose which facts support you, now you're in just that horrible, now you're in the dangerous apologetics territory.
Yeah. Anyway.
I was going to say, it's just...
Yeah.
Part of it that I'm wrestling with is that I'm trying to express is sort of like what they talked about in Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, where Jean Valjean, he stole a loaf of bread. And for the rest of the book, Javert is chasing him down because he stole the loaf of bread because him and his daughter were starving. And it's the idea that under some contexts, theft, stealing something is fine, like for survival. It's kind of almost in that self-defense category where killing somebody, murdering somebody is wrong, but killing in self-defense isn't. And there's a contextual aspect, and that's a major difference I see between the ancient world and the modern world, where they were dealing with an entirely different world in which to make their decisions, where things like, infant mortality rate through the window, child death through childbirth through the window, that puts a different pressure on society to solve problems. That we don't feel that pressure, and because we don't feel that pressure, we can divert our energy to solving different problems. And that's great that we can do it, but I think we're kind of shitty human beings if we look back and we condemn them for wrestling with problems that we didn't, and some of them doing it poorly. Tagging out on that.
Yeah, I kind of want to move on, but I do think that it's really easy to try and create the separation between the past and the present. But at the end of the day, like, you know, what do you mean by like the infant mortality was through the roof? Because that still is the case in a lot of nations. Like, at the end of the day, you know, we happen to live in, you know, such a different society than a majority of the people who live today. And so I think we can fall into this idea that everyone is living in the same, you know, in the same stage of, you know, existence. But, and again, not
We
to
can
say,
we can move on. I just want to note here, some of what you're doing from my standpoint is jumping from forest to tree level and leveling criticisms from both sides rather than being consistent. You're
no,
saying basically, it's like you're saying that there is no difference between the people in the past and the people in the present. And then you're turning around and saying, yes, there is a difference between it. And it's like, you can't use both of those principles in the same logical argument.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that not everyone is living in such a different society than you have, you know, however long ago. Like, still,
So I understand that. It sounds like this is one of those flaws of logic rules where you're using an anecdotal example to argue against a general rule. And basically saying, as long as one person in this world doesn't live by that, we can't say that this general principle has any validity. Sort of like if I drop a crystal glass from shoulder height and it doesn't break, we can't say that the rule that if you drop a crystal glass from shoulder height, it's going to break, or that you shouldn't do it because it's going to break. Well, one didn't break, so that's a bad rule.
Graham,
This is my autism here. It's one of those where, in my math, sorry.
Graham. And again, I'm sure you're probably going to argue that how were these statistics come up with, but okay, well, let's assume this isn't perfect, but if this is even close to right, 47% of the world lives on less than $6.85 per day. A poverty line brought, and the point I'm trying to make is this isn't a minority. It might not be a majority, but it's definitely not a minority.
Now you're into my wheelhouse when you're talking economic statistics and the world economic system, which I was taught to model in a matrix math. How much of that you have to evaluate income versus cost of living in an area. Virtually every area that has a low wage is also going to have a low standard of living. It's hand in hand. And what the problem is, people in the educated watching on the internet, they hear that $6 a day. They don't realize that $6 a day, that pretty much covers a lot of their needs that they have in that area. It doesn't come close to covering needs in a modern world. But now you're talking about, again, what I'm looking at is just a raw difference between the two. And I'm seeing this condemnation, this emotional reaction given to a set of facts that is because of my autism, I can't sign off on that emotional connection where you get the condemnation at. That's all. You're fine to go out on that limb, just like I go out on limbs you're not willing to. I'm just making sure the people know I'm not out on that limb with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, the key points that I'm trying to bring up here, though, is obviously it's not, India isn't one of the worst countries by infant mortality, but like basically a majority of the world lives in China and in India, not to mention, you know, everyone living in South America and everyone living in Africa and in the rest of Asia. But the point is that like, I mean, I you know, don't really want to get off into this tangent now, but the point is that, like, I think it's around half the world, at least, definitely more than 25%. It's got to be at least half because
Ariel,
yeah.
Do you recognize you're lumping and dumping all people in India and all people in China together? You're basically saying that women who is out in the rice paddies is essentially the same as the multi-billionaire capitalists in Hong Kong. And I just, man, I can't go there when people do that.
That's not
Hopefully
what
you can how is that not what you're saying? Because you're adding together the population of China, the population of India. You're basically adding those up as if those numbers are interchangeable within it.
Graham. So
Are you not? Let's
Graham,
break it down to base.
No, so can I explain what I'm saying? Within any nation, you're going to have however many billionaires or millionaires or whatever, but just like the thing is that when you're dealing with populations that are just that much drastically larger, inevitably there's going to be that many more people who are left behind. So I'm not saying that everyone's the same, by no means, but you definitely it like
Left behind has different meanings at different times, Ariel. Your welfare person in the US eats better than virtually every person on the face of the earth 100 years ago or earlier. They have access to better in-season fruit year-round. The meats are at a higher standard. It's night and day compared to what it is in 2023 versus before 1923. And I feel that people don't recognize that difference, and they just say, we're this way, everybody should have always been this way, and if they weren't like us, they're wrong. And I get to basically, shame and blame them for being wrong. And as I've tried to sit there and say, I'm fine with dealing with, cause and effect. But when people go out in that shame and blame, unless there's some sort of righteous reason behind it, I can't sign off.
So
Tag.
Look, you have a higher average population or poverty average in India than in the world, and what was it? So was it that 22% of the Indian population was back in 2012 is 270 million people. Like, and that's what I'm trying to argue. It's not a majority of the people in every society, but it does add up, especially when you're dealing with massive populations, because 22% of a country with, a billion people is going to be completely different than 22% in a country with 300 million people. But yeah, let's move on, because I do need to get going soon. You there?
Yeah, no, we're fine to move on. It's just, as long as we know that this is one of those, I can't go off on some of these shame and blame and condemnation paths that others do.
Again, I'm not like blaming or shaming anyone. I think that it's just important to realize that, not everyone is like living in the quote unquote 21st century.
Can you, this is a matter of definition for me, Ariel.
Mm-hmm.
How does condemnation work if there's no shame and blame involved? Because I'm willing to go with causality, but condemnation is beyond causality. Condemnation is a judgment and also an emotional judgment. And that's what I'm questioning is, how do you get, condemnation without having any shame and blame?
I'm talking about poverty. I'm not talking about, I don't even know what we were talking about before.
I'm talking about the process of condemnation, regardless of whether you're condemning poverty, murder, promiscuity. This is where I'm looking at a universal that's cross-cultural, the act of condemnation, which is part of a shame and a judgment, and then a shame and blaming. And if I'm misreading how condemnation works, I'm happy to be corrected, but that's what I'm seeing happening here. It's just a matter of insert your variable that you're condemning. And what's happening here, this is forest and trees. I'm arguing a forest, and you're picking out trying to support like the facts here as to why the condemnation is justified. And I'm questioning why condemn. Tag.
So again, yeah, like I just think that it's kind of pointless if you're looking at it in any context other than our own. If you're condemning something in the modern day, you're saying that's not acceptable today. Like, I think that, like, I honestly have never heard anyone who's going to make this argument that, like, because what can you do beyond just say this is not acceptable today? Like, I don't hear anyone making the argument that, like, what are we going to do? Go back into the past and arrest them for doing, like, that's literally impossible.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you just told me is you have never heard anyone blaming Jesus for the actions of subsequent Christians. Nobody condemning Christianity for how they've been treated poorly. To me, I've heard ridiculous numbers of people doing that. They are condemning and shaming and blaming Jesus and Christianity. They're not simply saying, I was hurt, it was wrong. They're looking into the past, pointing fingers, and outsourcing the problem. Tag.
I mean, yeah, but again, you're talking about that as an emotional argument as opposed to like because, for instance, there is such a thing as logical condemnations. Like, that's what, like, if someone's condemned to death, it's because they've been, and again, you can have cases where someone is, where that happens unjustly, but the idea is that when someone's condemned to a fate, or when or if a building is condemned, that it's being done for a reason, that it's not just this emotional response, but that there is a logical reason for it. But anyway, let's move on.
Okay, I'll just note that I see the modern usage of the parsing of condemn was in order to adapt it to a legal context, which law is inherently divorced from emotion. And they took in a word that had an inherent emotional context, stripped it from that context from a legal standpoint, but it still carries that meaning in most other contexts. Tag. We can move on.
Yeah. We'll be here forever.
Garments of the high priest at his party. He put on the choshen, the ephod, me'il, mitznefet, the tzitz. So to indicate that he put on all 8 begadim, there's a big chet. That's what the Rokach says. What about the big tough at the end of the Megillah? Well, when Esther wrote the Megillah, she said to the Chachamim, right now there are 25 books in Tanakh. I want my book to be the 26th book. I know. Or Chazal say there are 24 books in Tanakh. This was the 24th book of Tanakh. Esther said, I would like my book to be the 24th book of Tanakh. Chazal said no. The rabbi said no. We already talked about Amalek too much already. We already talked about them in the Chumash. We talked about them in the Navi. No more Amalek. And Esther brought a proof that we're allowed to speak about Amalek a third time. And the rabbi said, okay, we're going to put it into Tanakh. And it was, in English, the word is, it was canonized. It was allowed entry into Tanakh. So it was an eternal writing. Since it was an eternal writing, there's a big tuf to indicate it was an eternal writing. So the big chet is to indicate Achashverosh put on the 8 garments of Kohen Gadol. The big tuf is to teach that it was an eternal writing. Or the letter tuf is the 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. There are 22 famous Nashim, women who were tzidkaniyot, who made contributions to the Torah. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Hannah. Esther was number 22. So to indicate she was the 22nd Isha, so we have the big tuf. But still, what's interesting is there's no common approach to explain both of these big letters. In other words, we have one reason for the big chet, one reason for the big tuf, but not one reason for both of them together. And that we're going to explain. This Monday is Ta'anit Esther. Ta'anit Esther is a very difficult day. Most people have no idea whatsoever why we fast on Ta'anit Esther. I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to put you on the spot. Most people say, why do we fast on Ta'anit Esther? Oh, because Esther fasted, right? There's nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. Esther fasted in the month of Nisan, on Pesach. We don't fast on Pesach, this is Adar. So we do not fast Ta'anit Esther to commemorate Esther's fast. So why do we fast? So the Rosh says, because when the Jews were supposed to be killed on the 13th, they turned the table on their enemy, and instead of being killed, we killed our enemy. Now the Jewish people have a very unusual practice. When the American army fights a war, what do? They eat power bars, they eat fish, they eat meat, they have to be strong. When the Jewish people fight a war, we fast. How do we know that? When we went to war against Amalek, we fasted. So in the times of Purim, there is no documentation that they fasted. We have no evidence that they fasted. But presumably they fasted because Jewish tradition is they fasted. So to commemorate something that we have no evidence of, we just presume, we commemorate the fast of the Jewish people by fasting on Ta'anit Esther. Now we don't actually know they fasted, we just assume they did. Now that's something unusual. That's the whole reason for Ta'anit Esther, to commemorate a fast that we have no evidence of, we just presume they fasted. So we're going to learn tonight a very startling reason for Ta'anit Esther, that even though halachically it's the most lenient of all the fast days, Kabbalistically it's the most stringent of all the fast days, and the most important of all the fast days. And this idea comes, I saw this many years ago. And I was so surprised by this that I was afraid to speak about it until I found earlier sources. And then I did research. I found this is an idea written in the Sefer Yismach Moshe. Yismach Moshe was written by the progenitor of Satmar. You heard of Satmar Chasidus? The first rabbi who started this Chasidus lived in the times of Chatam Sofer, about 200 years ago. He brings this idea. He was a great Mikubal. This idea is found in the writing of one of the all-time great Mikubalim, Rav Shamshin of Ashtrapol. This is found even from the early 1600s. The idea goes as follows. Haman made a decree, lahashmid, laharog li'aved, to annihilate the Jewish people. But who endorsed the decree? Achashverosh, the Melech. But if it says Melech in the Megillah, we know whenever it says Melech in the Megillah, it means God Almighty also. That means God ratified and endorsed the decree. And Megillah says, Ki kitav asher nechtav b'shem ha-melech v'nachtom b'tabaat ha-melech ein lahashif. If God ratifies something, it will never be rescinded. Therefore, there's a concept that if
Oh my God, that's disturbing. So the implication is if they're connecting this to the Nazis, you know, with this whole idea of Purim Fest 1946, then the implication is that if Kabbalistically they can read it as God, I mean, I guess the understanding is anything that happens, God allows to happen, which I personally think is kind of a weak argument. The only way you can look at that is if you're viewing it within within this idea of, God as the one that has power over everything, but then you're also viewing God as immanent, or like it's one of those things where I think Judaism is really interesting, but it also doesn't really make a lot of sense from a traditional, ancient Near Eastern standpoint.
Oops. No, I was going to say I'd knock something over. No, I hear what you're saying. That's I lost my point. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, basically the implication is that, God decreed that the Holocaust was going to happen, but, he made another decree that, the Jews would survive. It's like, it's just a very abusive relationship. You know what I mean? Like this idea, oh, I'm going to, beat you up into a, square inch of your life. And then I'm going to let you get better. And then I'm going to do it again. And you need to keep loving me. Otherwise I'm going to do it again. Like it literally, if this were humans, it would be the definition of an abusive relationship.
Well, that's pure narcissistic abuse. And that's what ends up happening with legalistic religions. It's when they switch from going by the spirit of the law to letter of the law, all sorts of trouble start.
Oh boy, you're telling me.
Haman made a decree to annihilate the Jewish people, even though it didn't go into force in 2,000 years ago. Every single year, there's a looming decree on Klal Yisrael, Gezeirat Haman, and we need to be mevatel the Gezeirat every single year. And how are we mevatel it? Ta'anit Esther. So let's say this year there's some Ayatollah in Iran who's developing nuclear weapons, and it says on the missile, you know what it says. You saw the picture of the missile. You know what it says. That is a Gezeirat Haman. And how are we mevatel it? We're mevatel it through Ta'anit Esther. Did Gezeirat Haman ever come to fruition? Yeah. What year? 1648. You ever hear of the Khmelnytsky pogroms? The Cossacks? Khmelnytsky pogroms. Many Jews fast on the 20th day of Sivan to commemorate the Khmelnytsky pogroms. Khmelnytsky pogroms, the grandson of Chatam Sofer says, Khmelnytsky was Gilgul of Haman. His Cossacks were Gilgul of the Bnei Haman. He writes that, the grandson of Chatam Sofer, Shir Ma'on. The sheets didn't make it here because I was too close to after Shabbat. I'll be happy to send you. What year did Gezeirat Haman occur? 1648, 1649. How do you write in Hebrew? 1648, 1649. Tafchas. That's the big chet and the big taf. The big chet and the big taf in Megillah is the exact year Gezeirat Haman blew up. It happened. See, says the Yitzmach Moshe, why did God bring it in that year? Because if God would have brought in the times of Purim 2,000 years ago, there were so few Jews in the world then, that if that number of Jews would have been killed then, that would have been the end of the Jewish people. So Hashem deferred it to a time in history when there were more Jews, so that there could be a remnant of Jews. This is the approach, by the way. That means Haman's decree was never abolished. It was never nullified. It was just pushed off. It was deferred to the year 1648. Now, we know Haman was the embodiment of Nachash HaKadmoni, the original snake. Haman, what happened to him? He was hung on a piece of wood. In Parshat Bereshit, it said about the Nachash, because of the sin of the snake, V'kotz, Dardar. V'kotz, it refers to Haman. Because Haman was hung on a kotz, Dardar! What is the numerical value of Dardar? Tav Ches, 408. That's the year 1648. V'kotz, because Haman was hanged, Dardar! In the year 1648, his Gezerah came to fruition. That is a student of Chatam Sofer. So this is a very frightening idea. Gezeirat Haman was never abolished. It was never nizbatel. It's something we always have to think about. We have to knock away Haman every year, more and more. You know, Ben Ish Chai writes in the Ben Yehoyada. Ben Ish Chai writes in Ben Yehoyada. I'm going to ask you a personal question now, okay? Anyone here have snakes in their house? You could tell me, just between friends. No, you don't have. It's a little bit of a joke. Midrash says, very, very peculiar. Midrash says, if someone has snakes in their house, take the horn of a ram, blow smoke into it, and the snakes will disappear. So Ben Yehoyada, by the way, you know that today was the yahrzeit of Maran Gaon Uzeinu Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai. The Chida's yahrzeit was today. I have a very special kasher with the Chida. By the way, you know, the Chida passed away in 1806. The day he passed away, you know who was born? Abir Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Abi Chatzera. The day Chida passed away, Abir Yaakov was born. The remez is Yod Aleph Adar, Yod Aleph, Yosef Azulai, Yaakov Abi Chatzera. Anyway, it's very interesting. Chida lived 83 years. He wrote 83 Sefarim. The Ben Ish Chai tells us what the Midrash means is if we have snakes in the house, meaning if we still have to deal with Gezeirat Haman every year we have to deal with Gezeirat Haman, we need to take out shofar of the ayil. That's a reference to Esther. Esther is called Ayala. And by reading the Megillah and doing the mitzvot of Purim, every year we knock out Haman a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So what we're learning is Megillah is somewhat, even though it's the happiest document, it's also a frightening document. It's the document that records Gezeirat Haman. And Gezeirat Haman was not a one-time Gezeirat.
Yeah, what about it?
That's one of the early females in, I believe, Islamic tradition as well.
Interesting. So so there's also Ayala or Ayalet. This is actually one of the names of like someone who is, I think they're born male, but they end up presenting feminine, that they're called an Ayalet, and it basically means a doe or a fawn. But then you have like other terms that just specifically refers to someone who, you know, they're and then there's also this idea that you can be this way naturally or be this way through, you know, through a doctor or whatever. And like this stuff that's literally talked about in the Talmud all the way back, you know, 2,000 years ago. But yeah, so Ayala, it's basically it's the feminine form of Ayal, and it means like a ram, or I think an ibex also. Any ideas from that?
No, it's just I was noting the use of the same name in the traditions, and that makes sense. A lot of those female names and male names tend to have similar origins that they derive from.
Also, just another thing I thought about. So I was writing on this for an essay, but basically, so I you know, the whole biblical narrative is that Eve was created from the rib of Adam. But when Adam was, like, basically, it might it might actually be a mistake to be reading this as how to explain it. Like, it would be a mistake to read it as God's that God's taking and again, this is just my interpretation. It's a possible one. I'm not even saying this is what I think. But what if you have this idea that sorry, what was I trying to say? Basically, rather than a rib being taken out of the side of Adam, you actually have this, you know, Adam Kadmon that's basically, I think you could argue, you know, has two faces, basically, you know, back to back, but fused into one. So you have this Adam Kadmon, and when it says that the rib is taken out of the side, maybe it's saying that that one side, you know, one rib or one side of the ribs are being taken. Basically, that this Adam Kadmon is being split in half, and so then you end up after that. The biblical narrative is you have Adam and Ishto, Adam and his wife, but the thing is that the etymology that's given, so he's called Adam because he comes from the earth, and she's called and this is the thing that's interesting. She's not called this until, you know, way after, like, is already expelled from the garden, but she's called Chava, or basically life, or living one, for she's the mother of all living. There's only one problem with that. Isn't Adam contained within this context of all living?
Yeah. I was going to say some of what one of the interpretations I've taken out of that is the DNA interpretation, where Adam's rib was his X chromosome, and they split the X chromosome from the Y and then use that X chromosome to double it up and make Eve. Again, just one of the many possible levels of interpretation. Tagging.
Yeah, so I guess my argument is, what if it's actually that? Because keep in mind, Adam is put into a deep sleep, and so when he wakes up, Eve is there. It's like maybe the splitting is actually Adam being taken out of, this Adam Kadmon. In the act of taking out the male, you're creating the female. And so really he's being born from her, but in the act of being born from her, he's also creating her. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you know where I'm at. It's just because you have one level interpretation doesn't mean another one isn't totally valid.
It is looming. It is constantly threatening. It's something we have to deal with annually. We constantly have to reckon and deal with Gezerat Haman. So let's take this a little bit closer to our own times. I want you to take a look, please, in Perek Tes, in the 9th chapter of Megillah, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Okay, chapter 9, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Okay, what page, Rabbi? We're on 1260. Okay, now you have to understand. Throughout the Megillah, Achashverosh comes to Esther. Esther, whatever you want, I'm going to give you, except for one thing. Except for what? Beit HaMikdash. You could do anything, just not the Beit HaMikdash. Except for that building that stands in the midway point of my kingdom. Whatever you want. And then...
Sorry, 1 second.
After Haman took a misstep with Esther, and Achashverosh catches Haman, the Haman noifel al halmita asher Esther aleha. Achashverosh says, "What? In front of me in the palace?" He's fuming, and Chavona says, "Oh, well, we have this big gallows. Why don't you use them on Haman?" And the king says, "Tiluhu alav." And the king turns to Esther and he says, "Honey, whatever you want, even the temple. You want to build a temple? Whatever you want." Look in Pasuk Yud Gimel, chapter 9, 13th verse. Va toimer Esther mala melech toiv yinosin gamacha la Yehudim asher b'Shushan la asois kedas hayom v'eis asar b'nei Haman yislu al ha'etz. Listen carefully. You know what just happened? We killed the 10 sons of Haman. Achashverosh says to Esther, "Esther, I'll give you whatever you want." You know what Esther should have asked for? Beit HaMikdash. No, that's not what Esther asked for. Esther says, "You know what I want? I want to take the 10 dead bodies of the sons of Haman, and I want to hang them." What kind of crazy request is that? Why is the lady asking to hang?
That's interesting. I wonder if there is this tradition of him basically giving permission. Because even if that's not what she asked for, here's the thing that doesn't make sense. So, okay, so Achashverosh, there's not really any historical, account of him. You know what I mean? You there? Graham? If you're talking, I can't hear you. Graham? Hello? Hello, Graham? Oh, whatever, I'll continue. Hopefully, try and get it working again.
10 dead guys. They're dead. Their bodies are on the floor. What do we need to hang them up like a painting for? Just put them in the ground already. And why doesn't Esther ask for Beit HaMikdash? Why does she ask to hang 10 dead guys? We have to establish the following principle.
Graham, you there? Here, let me see if this works. Graham?
The greatest enemy of the Jewish people is Amalek. Every other nation, sometimes we have to destroy them. but we don't have to make sure that there's no memory of him, except for Amalek. Amalek is so evil that we have to make sure Timcha et Zecher Amalek. What?
Except they're not around anymore, which means that it's all spiritual, which means you're supposed to seek out that which is evil. But like, at the end of the day, and I hope he clarifies this, what does it actually mean to destroy Amalek today? Generally, it's this idea that it's so suffused into our society that it's almost this idea that everyone has to defeat Amalek within themselves.
What nation in our times, in the last 200 years, was Amalek? We have a tradition from the Vilna Gaon that the nation of Germany was Amalek. In 1891, the Chancellor of Germany, Wilhelm, went to visit the land of Israel. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and the entire community of Eretz Yisrael went out to greet this chancellor and to make a bracha over him because he was a powerful individual. And if you see him, you make the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shechalak mikvodo lebasar v'dam. And Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld said, I'm not going out. Why? I have a tradition from my Rebbe, Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, Germany is Amalek. How do we know they're Amalek? They dress.
You there, Graham?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, did you hear me asking if you were here before?
Yeah.
Oh,
I had a brief internet disruption, just a few seconds.
Okay. So basically, and I'm thinking about this. Do you know or have any theories about who Ahasuerus was?
No, refresh me exactly who that character is.
Ahasuerus, the king that the king of Persia in the Esther story.
Well, what was it? Artaxerxes, I think, is one of the leading candidates. I've heard Darius also suggested as well.
What about Cyrus?
The issue I have with that is I have trouble seeing Cyrus so much.
Any reason?
The story of Esther shows a more established Persian Empire than what was like basically getting established under Cyrus. It's basically Cyrus died towards the end of the establishment, and I just don't see within Cyrus's life where the story of Esther fits in well. I see it easier with Darius or Artaxerxes.
So I think that's the thing. If you're trying to fit the story of Esther into Cyrus, it's not going to work. But what happens if you try to fit the story of Cyrus into Esther? Like, basically, there's a lot of evidence that the story of Esther is highly mythical. Like that, there's very little. I mean, even the idea of a persecution by Persians is very scant. Like, there was a bit of persecution, but it wasn't like it wasn't anything that was specifically tied at Jews, and it wasn't genocide, which raises the question: what, like, basically, one of the theories is this is actually a Hellenistic era text that is being basically read into the exile in Babylon and Persia under the Persian Empire. And it just so happens that you have this one king that God happens to be working through, and he offers to his queen, who happens to be Jewish, that he'll allow, her, or maybe this tradition, I don't know where it's from, because it might just be something that it's like, oh, he could have, or she could have asked for that, but he did. So if he actually offered that, that would be interesting, because even if she didn't request it, you could still argue that he still granted permission. And the thing is that the only Persian emperor that we know that granted permission to rebuild the temple, or that was, I mean, I'd have to look more into the relationships between Jews and Persians, but I'm pretty sure that, like, basically, is it possible that you're just having the story of this nice, this nice Persian ruler who's being nice to the Jews? Maybe he's just getting, mythologized and immortalized within this figure of Ahasuerus, the the drink and fun-loving king who eventually his heart is softened by God.
And there you're emphasizing why I tend to mention Darius over Artaxerxes, who's the better philological name resemblance. If you look at the history, the Jews were able to return from exile under Cyrus, but basically the heavy building of the temple didn't start happening until Darius stepped in, sent a whole lot more funds, and kicked it into overdrive. And that's why I'm seeing the more of the parallels between Esther and Darius as opposed to either Cyrus or Artaxerxes. And again, at another level, I also sign off, and this is an archetypal mythological text in the sense of it's the generalized archetypical Persian ruler dealing with an archetypical Jewish bride of his. And again, dealing with a story on a mythological archetypal level, which is also working again on the individual's historical level at the same time, kind of thing. We've talked about some of my multi-level interpretations like that. Tag and see what you think there, Ariel.
Yeah. Well, let's continue. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my thoughts.
Impeccably. They look immaculate, but in their heart is eternal hatred and enmity to the Jewish people. They are Amalek today. In fact, I want to share with you a few lines of the Gemara, Masechta Megillah, about the power of Germany. The Gemara tells us that Yaakov Avinu, with prophecy, foresaw the power of Esav. I want to read to you Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Mai dichtiv, al titein Hashem avayei rasha. God Almighty, do not grant the desire of the wicked. Zemamay al tafek, do not let them carry out their plan. Amar Yaakov l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel olam, al titein le'esav harasha ta'avat libo. Do not grant Esav his desire. Zemamo al tafek, don't let him carry out his evil plan. Zu Germania shel Edom. That's Germany. Yaakov looked into 2,000 years, 3,000 years in the future, and he said, God Almighty, don't let Esav destroy the world. How would Esav destroy the world? Germany. Says the Gemara, if Germany would go out, they could destroy the world. Says the Gemara, Hana, Amar Rabbi Rami Bar Chama. Telat Mea Katiri Taga Ika Begarmam Yishaledo. There are 300 chieftains in Germany. Utelat Mea Veshitin Mechamisha Marzavni Ika Baromi. There are 365 leaders in Rome. Every day they fight a war. And Germany is very busy appointing a new king. This Gemara teaches us a great secret, that Germany has the power to destroy the world. There's only two things holding Germany back from destroying the world. Number one, they're not unified. There are 300 chieftains. Because they're not unified, they're fragmented. They have no achdut. They have no achdut, they have no power. And number two, they fight with Rome. Because they fight with Rome, they're incapacitated. But if Germany would ever unite and ally with Rome, they would destroy the world. So what happened in 1871? Now, if you think, I don't know what the Gemara means, Germany has 300 chieftains, let me read to you from The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shire. By the end of the Middle Ages, which had seen Britain and France emerge as unified nations, Germany remained a crazy patchwork of 300 individual states. But if Germany would ever unite, they will destroy the world. I'll read to you from the Hebrew Encyclopedia. The political disintegration of Germany had far-reaching economic effects. 300 princedoms and free cities guarded their economic autonomy fiercely. 1871, Bismarck rises to power. He unifies 300 Germanic republics. World War I breaks out. Germany is primed to destroy the world. However, Italy begins the world neutral. They end the war on the Allied side, not with Germany, and therefore Germany loses the war, and the world is safe from the power of Germany, because even though they're united, but they're not allied with Italy. Hitler rises to power, and the first thing he does is he begins to galvanize all the fragmented Germanic republics. And his generals and his advisors say that's insane, that's impossible. Why do we need to unite all Germanic republics? And Hitler somehow, his angel understood for Germany to be empowered, he needs to have one unified nation. And then Hitler makes one of the most bizarre political moves in history. He allies himself with Italy. Italy cannot fight to save their life. The only thing the Italians know how to do is they can make pizza. But nobody ever wanted Italy on their side. And the only treaty Hitler never broke, he broke every treaty he ever made with Poland, with Russia, with Hungary. He never broke a treaty with Mussolini. As if Hitler understood this Gemara, that if Germany would but unite and then ally himself with Italy, we're just talking about the Italians. Wow, it's unbelievable. Hashgacha pratit. If I would have spoken about Chinese, we would have had Chinese food. But You have to be careful what you say.
Unite with Japan.
Yeah, unite with Japan. Yeah, but he had this very bizarre, Japan was very powerful, we understand, economically and politically. But why would he make an alliance with Italy? Italy was not a very powerful nation. Hitler understood. Now I want to share something with you. I'm afraid to say this. I'm going to tell you it anyway. Do you know that the Chida writes that Achashverosh did not rule over the whole world? Achashverosh did not rule over Sepharad. And therefore, Sephardim were never under the threat of Haman. You know that? The Chida asks, why do Sephardim observe Purim? They were never endangered. Chida asked this question in 6 Sepharim. Sephardim were never endangered by Haman. But isn't it amazing? Nor were they really endangered by Hitler. Nor were they endangered by Hitler's Gilgal, the pogroms of Khmelnytsky. It's astounding. But we'll talk about that on a different occasion. By the way, if you want to understand what a Jew is, unfortunately, you need to study what Hitler writes about a Jew. Hitler says the Jewish people inflicted on the world 2 defects. The defect of the body and the defect of the personality. The defect of the body was Brit Milah. The defect of the personality is discipline and morality. Hitler says we will destroy the Jew, and once we destroy the Jew, we Germans will revert to being proud barbarians. Hitler understood that the Jewish people are the ambassadors of God in this world. We represent to the world morality, discipline, ethics, and he needed to eradicate the Jew in order for him to revert back to being a barbarian. Which means that it is the job of a Jew in this world. When we walk down the street, we represent to the world yesh din v'yesh dayan. We represent morality, tzniut, humility. When the world sees a Jew, they recognize that there's a creator, that there's law in this world, there's order in this world. Friends, Hitler unites all Germanic republics. He allies himself with Italy. And he is successful in carrying out Gezerat Haman. Lehashmid, laharog, ule'abed. It's now 1945. They set up in Nuremberg an international tribunal to try Nazi criminals. And 11 Nazi criminals are tried. Their names, Yamach Shemam V'Zichram, Hermann Göring, Hitler's second in command, Wilhelm Frick, Interior Minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, Ernest Kaltenbrunner, he was killed at Rebbe Chanan Wasserman, Hashem Yimkom Damai, Julius Streicher, editor of Der Stürmer, Fritz Saukel, Alfred Jodl, Hans Frank, Alfred Rosenberg, Arthur Seyss-Inquart. Here is a picture, by the way. The New York Times has no purpose in this world, except for when Mashiach comes and the Gentiles are going to say, we also want reward in this world. We help the Jewish people. God's going to take out the New York Times. No, you didn't help the Jewish people. And they're going to be dismissed. In 1945, they set up a wartime tribunal to try these Nazis. Originally, the court case was scheduled for 1945. It lasted until June. It was supposed to take place now in June 1946, Tafshin Vav. Tafshin Vav. The church, can you imagine? The church, Rishayim, they pled for amnesty. They asked that we should have rachamim on the Nazi criminals. So it was pushed off to October, Tafshin Zayin, Hoshana Rabbah, the day of judgment of the nations of the world. The night before, now, the French judge said, have rachamim on these criminals, they're good guys, just shoot them. And the Nazis just wanted to be shot because they felt that would be a more respectable way to die. And most of the judges said, no, we're going to hang you. And when the Nazis heard they were going to be hanged, they shook. They felt that was so demeaning and demoralizing. They were very scared of being hanged. And they were scheduled to be hanged on October 16th, 1946, Tafshin Zayin. The night before, Göring, second in command, committed suicide. So now there are only 10 sons of Haman to be hanged. Do you see the eerie similarity between these 10 Nazis who were hanged and the 10 sons of Haman? Says Rabbi Michael Ber Weissmandel, now we understand. Vatoimer Esther el HaMelech. Esther turns to God. She says, Im al HaMelech toiv, if it's good in the eyes of the king. The day will come in 2,000 years when the Jewish people will be reeling from the Holocaust. We'll be decimated. We're going to want to see the hand of God in the world. Please, Almighty God. Please, Machar, tomorrow. Tomorrow means in the far off future. Allow us to hang the 10 sons of Haman, the 10 Nazi criminals. Say, what do you mean? There were 11 Nazis. And one of them committed suicide. Yeah, but Haman also had an 11th child. Haman's daughter, she committed suicide. So you say, come on, that was a woman, and he was a man. This is not for the Beit HaKnesset, but if you know about Göring's deviant behavior, there's no question, one was a woman, one was a man, they were the same thing, okay? I'm not, enough said. He was parallel to her, b'chal davar. We'll leave it at that. I could tell you privately for more details, which are not necessary. If we look at Megillat Esther, 140 generations of reading the Megillah, nobody understood why in the 10 sons of Haman, there's a small taf and a small shin and a small zayin. And after the Nuremberg trial, 1946, we understand it was a remez to the exact year of the hanging of another 10 sons of Haman, the 10 Nazis predicted prophetically, taf, shin, zayin. So the first thing I did is I went to run to Megillah an old Megillah before the Holocaust, because maybe after the Holocaust, all the Sofrim, they got together and we make a small taf, a small shin, small zayin, so the rabbis could give nice shiurim. And of course, for 2,000 years since the story of Purim, Esther told Mordechai, when you write the Megillah, you put a small taf, put a small shin, small zayin. They asked, what is this? Wait. Nobody could understand until our times. We need the chizuk. We need the chizuk, the emunah. So for 2,000 years, no one understood why a small taf, small shin, small zayin. This was a prophetic message carried in Megillat Esther. So you'll ask, what do you mean? In history, taf shin zayin happened 6 times. 707, 1707, 2707, 3707, 4707, 570, 6 times. So how do you know which 707 it is? Maybe it's just a coincidence. So Esther told Mordechai, make sure in Megillah, you put a big vav to indicate the 6th time the year 707 happens. 5707. So you look in Megillah, you have 3 small letters, Taf, Shin, Zayin, and a big vav. By the way, now we understand why when the war was over, World War II was over, what's the first thing the international community does? They break up Germany into East and West. Why? Even though they didn't know the Gemara, the Malachim knew that Germany united is a dangerous Germany. We need to have a wall separating them. But let's focus for 1 minute. Why are the letters small, Taf Shin Zayin? Why not big like the Taf and the Chet? I would humbly suggest, in the year Taf Chet, that's when Gezeirat Haman became big, was magnified, came out to the world, came to fruition. And in Taf Shin Zayin, this is when Haman was squelched, when he was mitigated, when he was made small. That's when we conquered Haman. That's when we destroyed Amalek. We killed Atzeret B'nai Haman. So sometimes Haman's Gezeirat comes to fruition. When? The big Taf, the big Chet, 1648, 1649. And sometimes Haman is made small. He's mitigated. So you'll ask, why is the Vav big? The Vav big is because there was another occasion where Haman's Gezerah became big and came to fruition. The big 6, the 6 million. The big Vav represents the 6 million Jews. That's when it was fulfilled. Lahashmid, laharog, li'abed. And therefore, Ta'anit Esther is a very important Ta'anit. We have to reckon with Gezerat Haman. Haman is not gone. Haman's decree will loom large until the great day of Mashiach. Says Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz. When Esther wanted to make Purim a Yom Tov, the Jewish people said, it can't be a Yom Tov yet. So long as we have to deal with Gezerat Haman and Ta'anit Esther, not a Yom Tov yet. It's a happy day. But when Mashiach comes, Purim will be upgraded and will be a Yom Tov like all the Yom Tovim. In fact, it will be such a Yom Tov, all the Yom Tovim will become Batel, Purim will never become Batel. One of the reasons why we drink on Purim, we're so afraid of Gezerat Haman, so what we do, we drink, and then we lie down, Ki'ilu anu meitim, and we say, God, okay, this is Gezerat Haman. We fulfilled it. We were Mekayim it. That's the reason for the mitzvah, Chai ve'inish lebesumei bepuraya, ad layada ve'in arhaman lebaruch marachai. When people hear this remez, somebody once told me that in his mind, this is the clearest demonstration of divine intervention in history that he ever saw in the whole Torah. Can you imagine? In the Megillah, written 2,000 years ago.
Any thoughts so far on that? I mean, it is like, especially with the, was it Khmelnytsky tying around to, was it Taf Chet, and then this is like Taf Shin Chet, or I forget exactly what it is.
Yeah, I was going to say we touched on this the other night a little bit, or other morning, whenever we were actually on, where this very much echoes of the concept of a retrocausality, where events of the future, the book in the past was written because of the events of the future, and we talked about that, where the concept of the Ark of the Covenant and such is basically a radio through time sort of concept. Tagging on that. You're muted.
It's one of those things where you could look at it, it's like, oh, God's watching out for us. At the same time, it's like, wait, so this was all known and nothing was done to stop it. So it's kind of like, so God is somehow all-knowing and yet chooses not to stop it. It's kind of like it's, I don't know. It's definitely one of those
My
things.
way of looking at that is free will. God can't abrogate the free will, but he can basically, after the fact, account for it, for what's going to happen, even though he can't necessarily prevent somebody from choosing what they're going to choose. Does that make any sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it says exactly the day that the 10 Nazis were killed. I mean, do you have anything similar to that in the Chumash? It's unbelievable, black and white prophecy that in 2,000 years you're going to have 10 dead Nazis. I want to share with you a wondrous teaching of Khatam Sofer. What's the halacha? Does anybody know? If somebody's in the middle of learning Torah and comes Kriyat Megillah, do you continue learning Torah or do you read the Megillah? Megillah. Mevatlin Talmud Torah u'ba'in l'shma mikra Megillah. What if somebody's in the middle of doing avodah in Beit HaMikdash? Do you continue doing avodah or do you read the Megillah? You read the Megillah. The Baal HaTurim writes on this week's parsha. 3 times in the Chumash it says the word v'nishma. Na'aseh v'nishma. It says in this week's parsha v'nishma kolo b'vo el HaKodesh. And it says in Megillat Esther v'nishma pitkam hamelch asher ya'aseh. 3 times it says the word v'nishma. By Megillah, by Talmud Torah, and by avodah. To indicate, if you have a choice between avodah, v'nishma kol b'vo el HaKodesh, and Megillat Esther, v'nishma pitkam hamelch asher ya'aseh, Mikra Megillah is greater, the pasuk says. Ki Rabbahi, it's greater. It's greater. Actually, Baal HaTurim says, Rabbah is the one who says in the Gemara that Mikra Megillah is greater than Torah. Ki Rabbahi, Rabbah is the one who said it. But Megillah is greater than Torah? It's not greater, it's just you have to be Mevatel Torah to hear the Megillah, but it's not greater than the Torah. You ready for this? Khatam Sofer says, I'm going to tell you his language. Or Kadosh Hanichlal b'Megillah hu yoter gedola v'nechbad me Torah atzma. The light of Megillat Esther is greater than the Torah itself. How could you say that? Are you allowed to put Megillat Esther on top of the Torah? No. Kedushat Megillah is more than Torah? No. So how could Khatam Sofer say the light of Megillat Esther is greater than the Torah? This is Ayon ben Ara. I'm going to end with this. The Medrash says there's certain things in this world that are novel of the real thing, a semblance of the real thing. Like sleep is a semblance of death. Chalom, a dream, is a semblance of prophecy. Divash is a semblance of the man. Shabbat is a semblance of Olam Haba. The Medrash continues. The Torah is a semblance of Chachma Elyona. What? The Torah is only a semblance of the Chachma Elyona? I thought the Torah was the highest wisdom. But no. The Torah is what Hashem gave us on our level, so we're able as a Basar V'Dam to understand His wisdom. But higher than that is Chachma Elyona. Say the students of Arizal, is there anything that we have that's raw Chachma Elyona, even higher than Torah? Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther is from Chachma Elyona. It's even Yoter Gedola v'Nechbad meHaTorah Atzma. There's a certain Kedusha, a certain Or. The Arizal writes, the light of Purim is a greater, more powerful light than any miracle that ever happened to the Jewish people. And it's a light that reoccurs every single Purim. The light of Purim is a greater light than any Yom Tov in history. And it occurs every single Purim. And therefore, the day of Purim has a special koach. Special koach hatfilah. The same way we say, Kol haposhet yad notenim lo. Somebody asks for tzedakah on Purim. We don't ask any questions, we just give to them. Likewise, God deals with us. Whatever we ask on Purim is especially effective, is especially successful. So we hope and we pray that this year on Ta'anit Esther, we give Amalek the final knockout punch. Does anybody know how many times Haman is in the Megillah? 54 times. How many times Esther in the Megillah? 54 times. How many times Zeresh in Megillah? 4 times. So Haman and Zeresh, 58. Mordechai, 58 times Mordechai in Megillah. Haman, 54 times. How many letters in the 10 sons of Haman? 54. How many words in the Tfilah? Bimei Mordechai ve'Esther b'Shoshana bira? 54. How many words in the first parsha of Kriyat Shema? 54. Kriyat Shema, mevatel Haman. Whatever we do, we try to be mevatel Amalek. Says Maran, Gaon Uzeinu Chida, today was his yahrzeit, when you answer Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. Amen Yehei Shem Ka, the name Ka, that Amalek makes Ka, Ki Yad Al Kes Ka. Rabbah, we pray it should be 26. That's why the Ta'amei HaMikra, on the word Zachar, is Zakef Gadol. Zakef Gadol is Vav and 2 Yuds, 26. We want to be Mashlim, the name of Hashem. We do 4 mitzvot on Purim, connected the 4 letters of Hashem's name. By doing these mitzvot, we hope to give final knockout punch to Amalek. We knock out Amalek, B'chodesh Adar. When does Geula come? Chodesh Nisan. V'Nisan Negalu, V'Nisan Asidin Ligael. This Shabbat, we got the ball rolling. We tried to knock out Amalek. We're preparing ourselves for Chodesh Nisan. We hope through the avodah of Parshat Zachar, the avodah of Purim, the avodah of Ta'anit Esther, we deliver the final knockout blow to Amalek. With chutz zeh, we hope in the upcoming month of Nisan, the Nisan Negalu, V'Ezrat Hashem, the Nisan Asidin Ligael. In this chutz of us coming together tonight, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring the Geula closer. I wish you all a Shavua Tov, Purim Sameach. May we zocha together. Next year, Purim, Yerushalayim Habenuya. Amen.
Sorry, that was kind of long for not a whole lot of payoff. Let me see if I can just find one quick video.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of bothered me there, Ariel, is he came. Well, this one I just want to single out is every time he started talking about the evils of Germany and the German people, and talking about how a united Germany is bad and we need a wall between them, I just kept flashing to the inverse and hearing Germans talk about Jews and the Jewish people and how they're an inherent problem. And it's like, both of you people talking like this is the problem. Tagging to you.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's just it's bizarre because it's like, just because it's written there, like at the end of the day, you could view that as that's where this great evil will come out of, but it's not to say that it is the great evil. You see what I'm saying? I think that would, yeah.
Exactly. The great evil are those bad Nazi leaders. And that's one of those things that I've always been consistently emphasizing is you have that 1% of Nazi leadership that was truly evil and despicable. And you got at least probably a good 75% of the German people that if things were different, they never would have gone down that path. And it's sort of like you're condemning the majority for just this time that you're condemning the majority for the acts of that very, very small group that is righteously condemned for their own actions, not for being German, because they were evil and did evil stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it wasn't just the Nazi leadership, it was the Nazis. And obviously you had resistors that resisted from within the Nazi party apparatus. But like, for instance, a majority of Nazis, I think you could say, like, and again, I think what we need to talk about is people who were Nazis in their hearts, not people who happen to just be, because I think, there is a much more nuanced conversation, but basically people who were happy when they were murdering people, that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. What I'm trying to sit there and say, there are some people who get lumped into them. And that's what I'm saying with, if things were different, they wouldn't have gone that way. Where they basically, they had that herd mentality and went along with the group. And when they saw that the group was going over the evil cliff led by the despicable evil ones we're talking about, there were very few people who are willing to, it's like the prophets. There are very few people who are willing to stand up against the majority and call them out as being wrong. And that's where your resistance, your people hiding Anne Frank, that's where those people come from. But they're a different breed than, I'm saying, the more neutral ones that they just want to get along in life. And to fight against the evil Nazis was harder for them to get along in life than just kind of blindly going along. And I think there's a huge number of people in the middle that fell into that category. Tag.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find, well, unfortunately I'm not, wait, is, let's see, oh wait, hold on, I'm not thinking, I probably should, hold on one second.
Yeah, I think the concept I'm using was used by the communists for the useful idiot term, where they're more ignorant people, usually relatively good natured, but they just sort of go along with the group and they're easily led. Tagging to see if you found your stuff.
Yeah, one moment. Let's see. Here, this might be it.
At Alliance Defending Freedom, we work, we march to give every child.
What comes to mind when you think of Purim? Noisemakers for kids? Free-flowing liquor for adults? Costumes and sweets for everybody? Purim is all of these things and more. Let's dive into the history of the holiday and understand one of its most beloved symbols, the triangle-shaped cookies called Hamantaschen. How have interpretations of their meaning changed with the times? Here's the CliffsNotes version of the story of Purim in case you aren't up to speed. The holiday commemorates the survival of the Jews of ancient Persia in the face of genocide. It's all in the book of Esther. After King Ahasuerus offs his queen for standing up to him, the king falls in love with Esther, a bright and beautiful young Jewish woman. He doesn't know that part yet.
So just for context, he demanded that she appear before his entire party completely naked except for wearing a crown, and she refused, and so he had her head cut off. Under orders, or under like whispers in his ear from Haman, but still, like, what the fuck?
yet. At the same time, Esther's cousin Mordecai foils a plot to kill Ahasuerus and earns himself a nod in the king's memoir. Later, Mordecai refuses to bow down to the king's power-hungry advisor Haman, who advises the king to murder all the Jews in the kingdom as his revenge. King Ahasuerus, who apparently had a short memory, responds with a royal, yeah, sure, whatever. When Mordecai and Esther learn of Haman's evil plot, Esther risks her life and pleads with the king to save her people. For once, King Ahasuerus does the right thing and listens to Esther, approving both Haman's execution and a plan for the kingdom's Jews to counterattack the army Haman had assembled against them. Everyone left alive celebrates with an epic feast. In other words, they tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. If that summary of the Purim story seems a little irreverent for a major religious holiday, don't worry. It's perfectly consistent with traditional Purim celebrations. Because there are multiple giant feasts in the Book of Esther, and because royal wine plays a leading role in its story, Purim has been the most raucous holiday on the Jewish calendar for centuries, a Jewish Mardi Gras of sorts. Friends and family send each other gifts of sweets and wine called mishloach manot. Purim services include costumes, singing, dancing, and comedy sketches called Purim spiels in Yiddish. During Purim readings of Esther, congregants in synagogues typically boo or make noise every time the name of the villain, Haman, is mentioned. The rabbis of the Talmud command that a person is obligated to become intoxicated with wine on Purim, that they do not know how to distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordecai. So, Purim parties, even Orthodox Jewish ones, have a tendency to get lit. With those drinks flowing, you're going to need snacks to soak it all up. And the children and other non-drinkers deserve a holiday treat too. Mizrahi Jews traditionally bake mamuls, a cookie stuffed with nuts or dates. For Ashkenazi Jews, the customary Purim treats are hamantashen, triangle-shaped cookies folded around a sweet filling. These iconic cookies have fueled Purim parties for generations, and there are about as many different kinds of filling as there are Purim costumes.
Any thoughts on the shape?
Well, obviously, that's a presaging of the Trinity in Christianity, right?
Somehow I feel like that answer might be more acceptable to the rabbis than what I'm about to tell you.
Okay, well, I'm also willing to say that I'm sure somewhere out there on Google there's somebody who made that one up before me.
Wait, made what? What?
Oh, the fact that the hamantashen were a presaging of the Trinity. I'm just willing to bet there's some Christian apologist who came up with that long before I did.
So, any other guesses?
Hat is what jumps into my head.
So that's the traditional understanding, but there's a deeper, more historiographical one.
Okay, looking at them, the opening of blood pouring out would be an obvious one, but I've shot my my pellets at the skeet. Why don't you explain?
I will in a moment.
Though everyone knows poppy is the best. This treat has evolved in form and meaning over centuries of Jewish culture. The oldest written mention of hamantashen dates back to 16th century Italy. A Purim play by Yehuda Somo references a treat called Oznei Haman in Hebrew. The phrase literally translates to Haman's ears. Before you lose your appetite, don't worry. There is no evidence that his ears and head were ever separated. Also, several Eastern European cultures make dumplings with names that translate to little ears. So this 16th century name may just be referencing a dumpling for Purim. Chronologically, the next version we can find of the modern hamantashen is the Central and Eastern European mon, or poppy seed-filled dessert. Many dishes from the region feature poppy seeds. A pastry or cookie pocket would be called a tash in Yiddish. So, mon tashen would be cookie pockets filled with poppy seeds. Imagine saying that again and again over a span of a few hundred years in different Yiddish dialects and regional accents, and Montashen could end up sounding a lot like Hamantashen. It's entirely possible that Haman's name became associated with these cookies through coincidental variations in language and pronunciation. Either way, that association has stuck. Jewish children for generations have learned that the cookies are triangular because Haman wore a tri-cornered hat. This could be true, but our sources on 4th century BCE Persian royal court fashion are pretty limited, since all the copies of ancient Vogue burned up with the Library of Alexandria. A more recent interpretation of hamantashen brings the focus back to the hero of the holiday story, Queen Esther. The triangle-shaped cookie could in fact represent a uterus. We know that's a long walk from a hat, but hear us out. Esther's youth and beauty were the secret to her successful appeal to King Ahasuerus to save the Jews.
Is that one of the things you were thinking?
Nope. I had gotten to Haman's ears, but I had not gotten to a uterus. For some reason, I just didn't make the leap from Haman's ears to a uterus. Silly me.
Well, it's because you were thinking of Haman. You weren't thinking of Esther. But the whole, like, literally the whole story is, it's literally about this idea of the divine feminine being, embodied within Esther, but literally this idea of the divine feminine saving everyone. And I mean, and this is what I was saying before, if the king offered to build the temple, if he offered to build the temple, then I really think there's an argument that Esther could have been a Messiah. But given she wasn't like this understanding of the Messiah, given I don't even think there really is one, because at the end of the day, the temple can be built and then it can be destroyed. But the idea is that, like, if a Messiah can keep on coming, it's not because this person keeps on getting reincarnated. It's because it's not the person. It's the thing that embodies within them.
Yeah, now you're going into what I finally ended up with a interpretation of Christianity that worked for me, with the idea of individuals and then the archetype, and the archetype being constant and the individuals being an incarnation. And you're very much hitting on the same thing here with Esther as an incarnation of the divine feminine. And again, that being a type of Messiah, 100%.
Yeah.
Of Persia, not to mention the reason she became his queen. In ancient literature, youth and beauty are often code words for fertility. Queens throughout history were chosen for their ability to produce an heir to the throne, and the same is true for Queen Esther. Since Purim is an early spring holiday, symbols of regrowth and fertility wouldn't be surprising. Consider the European Montashen in this context. It's a cookie filled with poppy seeds, and it happens to have the same triangular shape as most textbook illustrations of a uterus. The feminine symbolism pays tribute to the holiday's hero, Queen Esther, instead of drawing attention to Haman, the genocidal villain. And there's never a wrong time to recognize a woman of valor who saved Judaism for generations to come. Just ask your mother. Hamantashen are for everyone. Children, adults, Jews, non-Jews, everyone. There's a Hamantashen filling for every taste. Poppy seed, fruit, nuts, chocolate and peanut butter, savory fillings like cheese and spinach, as well as gluten-free options are available too. The possibilities are as endless as your imagination. Just be sure to make a big batch. You'll find plenty of hungry friends at your Purim celebration. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, consider subscribing. And if you have a topic you want us to tackle in an up.
But yeah, I mean, the poppy seed also, I mean, I don't want to get too graphic, but it definitely looks very graphic, very lifelike, if you think about it. But
definitely.
And like, it's interesting though, because think about it. If that was a tradition, why was it covered up? And it probably has a lot to do with this idea that, women and the feminine was basically confined to inside the house. And like, I mean, so much so that like, and this isn't something, it's not, I don't think it's actually biblical, this concept of like that women are impure after they're on their period. That's something that the rabbis came up with. I might be wrong though.
I was going to say, I'm willing, when in doubt, trust the rabbis to make up a rule. And my guess is that was involved with an idea of entering the temple and a need for a ritual which the rabbis have control over before women can enter the temple. Just noting what I see as facts rather than putting any sort of emotional judgment on it. Tagging.
So Kara said, any thoughts on the shape? And then she said, they look like grams too. Then Nick said, mom, yummy. I think he meant yummy, but maybe that was a Freudian slip. I feel disgusting for even saying that.
Sometimes you got to go there. As long as it's for a joke and you don't mean anything mean, yeah, it's all good in my book.
Yeah. So let's see if I can find Here, let's check this out.
The Jewish holiday of Purim is coming up this week, a celebration of overcoming adversity. Faith Saley tips her hat to the cookie that all but defines the holiday.
Oh, they look like your logo. They kind of do.
This week at Bread's Bakery in New York City, one cookie is bound to outsell the rest.
Hamantaschen are the most perfect little cookie. The most requested item that we get to continue to do all year is Hamantaschen.
Really?
Yes, and you're getting the first look at these. We have
Gadi Peleg is the bakery's owner.
So those are chocolate Hamantaschen, sort of like a brownie nestled inside.
A quick note here, Ariel.
Hamantaschen are triangular-shaped cookies.
Apricot made with a...
Oh. I was actually very amused at the efficiency of the hexagonal tessellation that they were cutting, that they were placing over the dough, where nothing's ever wasted. It's just the efficiency is just, it appeals to me. Tag.
Delicious apricot jam.
Traditionally filled with poppy seed or jam.
It's the perfect cookie because it contains what I call the golden ratio of cookie. There is exactly a 1-to-1 ratio of filling the crust.
They're served during the Jewish holiday of Purim, which begins Wednesday.
So the story of Purim is actually one of the more dramatic stories in the Bible. It's actually the only story in the Hebrew Bible that doesn't mention God. It's a purely human drama, and it is extremely dramatic.
Stephanie Butnick is deputy editor of Tablet Magazine and host of the podcast Unorthodox. She explains the story of Purim begins in ancient Persia with a king, a queen, and a villain, the king's advisor Haman, or as some say, Haman.
And Haman hates the Jews. What he does not know is that Esther, the queen, is secretly Jewish. And so when he basically cooks up this plot to kill all the Jews in ancient Persia, Esther decides that if she wants to save the Jews, she has to out herself, essentially, as being Jewish.
So Esther confronts the king and ultimately convinces him to stop Haman's plot.
The Jews get saved, Haman gets killed, and that's the holiday we celebrate today.
The pastry, however, wasn't baked into the holiday until the 16th century, when it was inspired by the German cookie Mohntaschen, Mohn meaning poppy seed, and Tasch meaning pocket.
And so Haman is the villain of the Purim story, and so Jews sort of said, wait, what if we call this cookie a Hamantaschen and we can eat it on Purim? And now we have these Hamantaschen, which are technically Haman's pockets. People say it's Haman's ears, people say it's Haman's hat. So we've sort of just made this cookie into what it is that we want it to be.
And as the meaning of the triangle has evolved, so has Hamantaschen itself.
Do you see me waiting? Can we try one?
I think we should.
At Bread's Bakery, they're cooking up new flavors. Pizza Hamantaschen, anyone?
That's so good.
And classics like Poppy.
But basically all I'm doing is I'm connecting these points. And I end up getting a beautiful Hamantaschen. One down.
One down. Thousands more to go.
Yep.
The process of making Hamantaschen is relatively simple, and the significance of the triangle even a little silly. But when put in context, Stephanie Butnick says it's a recipe for what Jewish celebrations are all about.
I think to me it's this Jewish spirit of resilience and celebration that we actually eat a cookie named after one of the top 3 villains in Jewish history.
Yeah, it's like taking a bite of Jewish people's survival.
Yes, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat a delicious cookie.
Oh, that's really cool. So,
Freddie's new birthday.
That's a good place to end off. But yeah, we could always talk after, but I'm gonna start up the thing. So it was good seeing everyone, and I'll see you all next time.
Always good, Ariel. Always good.
Want to tell the Rebbe the words of the new song that we're singing with Mashiach, right? So I'm just going to read him. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Okay? We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. Oh yeah, Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be this year. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now.